the schedule for this meeting. The date, time, and location of this meeting were accurately set forth therein. On January 8th, 2021, this notice was provided to all schools, all PTO presidents, the BHEA president, posted at the administration building. On the same date, a copy was emailed to the public library, tapped into Berkeley Heights, the Courier News, and filed with the municipal clerk to file and posted town hall. The meeting will also be announced on the district sign at Columbia. Roll call. Mike DeQuia.
Present.
Joy Young.
Present.
Robert Cianciulli. Jordan Hyman.
Present.
Angela Penna.
Present.
Chris Rowley.
Here.
Helen Kirsch.
Here.
And I'm Doug Reinstein, and I am, of course, here. Could I have a motion to move into executive session?
I'd like to make a motion to move into executive session.
Second.
Motion is second. For the couple of members of the public, we are going to adjourn to executive session. We will return to this public session at 7:30 to start our meeting in approximately 1 hour. Thanks, and we'll see you shortly.
So moved.
Thank you. We are back in the public session. Can everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Rob, he's not on video.
I can't do that right now.
I'll text Mike.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our meeting tonight. We have two agenda topics that we'll cover this evening. The first one is a recognition of one of our athletic teams, and the second one is a discussion about full-day kindergarten. So let me begin the meeting. Let me begin by hoping everyone had an enjoyable spring break wherever and however you celebrated it with your family. Tomorrow marks the end of our all-remote week following spring break, and we'll soon enter the next phase of our pandemic challenge school year as we welcome both Columbia and GL students to Plan A. We look forward to seeing those students in school this upcoming Monday. Let me address the focus of tonight's meeting. Full-day kindergarten is an incredible opportunity for our district to enhance and improve early childhood education. It's long overdue in Berkeley Heights. The challenge in front of us is how can we best implement it utilizing our existing resources. Tonight is another step along the journey of building the best long-term academic solution, AKA our school structure, for all of our students. You'll hear words like developmentally appropriate schools, providing equity programs and services for all of our students, and consistent staffing and class sizes. You won't hear them because they're the latest buzzwords. You'll hear them because they're the bedrock for building and maintaining the best academically focused school system we can, where all students, regardless of the elementary school they attend or the neighborhood that they live in, have the greatest chance to succeed each and every day. To reiterate, this is a huge opportunity. It's a change from our existing school structure, one that will be impactful in many ways. It is significant in its benefits to all of us in Berkeley Heights, and one that I and our team want to make sure is transparent and well understood so that we collectively embrace it from the onset. The success of implementing any proposed changes hinges on your full understanding of the recommendation, and you're providing input and feedback to the process. That is the primary reason why we'll be having 3 sessions for parent and residents to ask questions and provide feedback. We'll answer questions at tonight's meeting. We'll be conducting 2 town halls on the evenings of Wednesday, April 14th, and the following Thursday, April 22nd. Additionally, we will survey the elementary school community so families can select which scenario they prefer. In a few minutes, you'll hear from Dr. Varley and her administrative team about the scenarios that were considered and the recommendation of how best to implement full-day kindergarten in our district. We began with a problem statement and a set of guiding principles. We started with a clear, crisp definition of what challenge we were trying to solve. And it's quite simply a Mary Kay capacity issue. Mary Kay McMillan doesn't have the capacity to house all of the kindergarten and first grade students when the district implements our comprehensive full-day kindergarten September 2021. To guide us through the data, the research, and ultimately the scenarios and recommendations, it was important that we outline 5 guiding principles. We believe it's critical for parents to understand these principles as they represent the philosophy and the values that guided the team and allowed us to sharpen our focus on what outcomes were important, as well as preventing the team from pursuing scenarios that weren't in the best interest of students. The guiding principles are as follows. Number 1, make our schools developmentally appropriate for like-age children and provide equitable services for all students. You're going to hear much more about these 2 topics tonight. Number 2, optimize the efficiency of our resources by balancing enrollment across all elementary schools. Currently, our elementary schools range from an enrollment of 177 at Woodruff to 320 at Mary Kay. We have the capacity, however, it's not aligned with our current enrollment. Number 3, provide for future growth given new housing developments. Our district can comfortably handle the expected growth. However, it still needs to be planned and accounted for. Number 4, minimize the change impact where possible for students changing schools. A great deal of time was spent on this principle with multiple scenarios being evaluated. And number 5, maximize where possible the number of children who could walk to their neighborhood schools. It was encouraging to see the most recent lawn signs that say, quote, save our neighborhood schools, because in fact, that is exactly what we are doing. Our team evaluated 3 fundamental scenarios. 1, do nothing and postpone full-day kindergarten. 2, move first grade students to the existing elementary schools. And 3, reorganize our district into 2 K-2 schools and 2 grades 3 to 5 schools. Tonight, there will be a recommendation for changing our school district structure to have 2 K-2 schools at Mary Kay McMillan and Woodruff, and 2 grades 3 to 5 schools at Hughes and Mountain Park. This recommendation is backed by both experts in the field of instruction, along with best practices in the discipline of early childhood education. There are 2 implementation scenarios. One scenario is a 1-year transition where all changes happen this September, and a second scenario which spreads the changes over the course of 2 years, with full-day kindergarten happening this September with no redistricting, and redistricting happening the following year in year 2, which would be in September 2022. Whether you wind up supporting the 1 or 2 year transition, in both cases, less than 20% of elementary school students will be going to a different school. This fact bears repeating. In the K-2 and 3 to 5 going forward school structure, less than 20% of students will experience a change in their school location. For those who believe this was a large scale or wholesale movement of students to other schools, it simply isn't true. For those who thought we were dismantling Woodruff and sending everyone to Hughes and Mountain Park, we'll see that exceptions have been made to minimize the transitions. For example, rising 5th grade students attending Woodruff or Hughes will have the option of remaining at their current school for their 5th grade year. For the students who are impacted by the redistricting, yes, it does represent change. However, we'll work with both the students and the families to make the transitions as smooth as possible. However, the large majority, again, roughly 80%, will see no change to where they go to school today or in the future. Similar to my comments last year about the pandemic, there is no perfect implementation solution. Perfection simply does not exist. And the last thing we want collectively is to have perfection stand in the way of progress. Moreover, there is no clear-cut, no fully right or wrong scenario when it comes to the timing, whether it be 1 year or 2 years. Over the past few weeks, some members of our community have distracted from this discussion with comments about upcoming elections, superintendent's contract renewal, open public meeting law violations that require contacting the Attorney General, inaccurate claims about what was said at previous Board of Ed and Town Council meetings, and finally, that the Board of Ed isn't interested in parent feedback, that these upcoming meetings are just part of their marketing pitch. We strongly encourage you to ignore these distractions, learn the facts of the scenarios that we're sharing with the public this evening. The truth is quite the opposite. There'll be 3 multi-hour sessions where parent input is not only welcomed, it's encouraged. Further demonstrating the value the board places on parent input, elementary school parents will be surveyed and have the opportunity to indicate their preferred scenario. This way, both those who are vocal and the larger, more silent majority will have an equal say in the outcome. In closing, we have an opportunity to implement full-day kindergarten, improve early childhood education with more developmentally appropriate schools, expand equity in our programs and services, and do so with as minimal impact as possible. What do we ask from you tonight and over the next few weeks? Simply listen to the presentation, ask questions to better understand the scenarios and how it might impact your child, provide feedback, and indicate your preferred scenario when asked. Thanks for listening. With that, could I get a motion for the approval of minutes of our March 18th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those minutes are now part of the public record. Donna, correspondence.
There are several pieces of correspondence on the agenda. There is an email from Mrs. Newman regarding the SRO at the high school. There are 2 emails from Mr. Martinez regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. There are 3 emails and a petition regarding concerns about full-day kindergarten and redistricting. There is an email from Mrs. Pogue regarding the Little Lord House. And there's a thank you from Mr. Larson regarding full-day kindergarten. And then we have 12 new OPA requests since our last meeting.
Great, thanks, Donna. The next we have our student representatives. Do I see our student representatives? Let's give Mike a second to promote our students. Emily and Tomas. Let's see. Okay, Emily should be coming online. Emily, I just unmuted you. There you are.
Perfect, thank you.
Emily,
Good
Emily,
evening.
Emily, good evening. How are you tonight?
Good, how are you?
Great.
All right. So sports are in full swing. Season 3 is coming to a close with wrestling heading towards the regional tournaments and volleyball towards their state tournaments where they are seeded 5th. As those games' final matches play out, season 4 is going into full swing. Today, softball had their first game and won. This is a moment to remember. Just a short time ago, or should I say long time ago, over the past year, no games were allowed to be played and all sports were shut down. As we come full circle, things become amped up for the spring. Boys lacrosse have their first scrimmage Saturday. Tennis is having challenge matches to decide the lineup. Golf, track, girls lacrosse, and baseball all begin within the next week. All are happy to be able to play from last year and hopefully get some wins. As for school, after spring break, all the students are all looking forward to the new schedules and cohorts that are being decided. Seniors are anxious to see their whole class in for the start of the 4th marking period as more people come back to school. Overall, there are a lot of exciting moments happening at GL as we look to more normalcy. Thank you.
Emily, great. Thanks very much. Tomas, good evening. How are you tonight?
Doing well. How are you?
I am very well.
Okay. So with the beginning of the 4th marking period, many clubs are preparing for their final events to wrap up the year. The Year About Club is actively polling the student body for their preferences in fast food, video games, books, and more, which helps students remember this point of their lives later on. The sophomore and junior class student governments have been holding fundraisers at nearby restaurants to raise money for their proms. The GL Marching Band will be holding a socially distant basket raffle this Saturday. And in a year that has been so challenging for teachers and administrators, the student ambassadors are planning staff appreciation projects to show their appreciation for all of their work. The students are making mini gifts, videos, and picture slideshows, mini goodie bags, and more. Additionally, the Guitar Club, Music Club, and Coding Club continue to host regular meetings. The Understanding Asian Culture Club has also continued to hold regular meetings, sharing an informative presentation on Chakra Day, a Thai holiday, in one of those meetings. In another meeting, the club discussed the recent Stop Asian Hate rally and announced a poster contest to spread awareness towards hate crimes directed towards Asians. Though time is drawing short, students continue to pursue a multitude of activities as the year ends.
Great, Tomas, thank you very much. Any questions from the board members for our student reps?
I have not a question, but a comment. I just want to thank Tomas. At the last board meeting, I had a question about the spring musical play, and Tomas didn't have the answer. The very next day, I had an email from Tomas with the answer. Very responsive. Thank you very much for the follow-up. That's very, very impressive. So I just want to thank you, Tomas. It's a great representation as a student representative to the board.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for our student reps? Seeing none, Emily and Tomas, thank you very much. Now we'll move on to the report of the superintendent, Dr. Varley.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. As several community members have told me, full-day kindergarten has been discussed in Berkeley Heights for many years. I know that everyone here will say that they support full-day kindergarten. They are right for doing so. The research is overwhelming that the benefits for students in full-day kindergarten are literally life-changing. They positively impact student learning for years to come. The issue that has caused many emotions to run high is redistricting. If you ask any superintendent, they will tell you that redistricting is one of the most difficult decisions that a community faces. 4 months ago, district administration was tasked with creating a plan to implement full-day kindergarten. We have spent the last 4 months crunching numbers and exploring every possible option, and very quickly determined that redistricting was the best solution for the implementation of full-day kindergarten. I would venture a guess that is why Berkeley Heights is one of the few I or J districts in the state of New Jersey not to already have implemented a program that everyone knows is so educationally beneficial. I will not reiterate any of Mr. Einstein's points, and I will let the presentation lay out the reasons and details for our proposals. But I have to thank the administrative team who worked tirelessly for months doing the research and putting the proposal together. I have to thank Donna Felizzola, Scott McKinney, and Mary Beth Kopaz for going above and beyond. I also, without fail, must mention Diane Azalone, my administrative assistant, and Kelly Sheehan, our busing coordinator, who worked through their vacations to provide finishing details. And they know we have about 473 versions of this presentation. In other news, on April 12th, we welcome back all students for grades 1 through 12 for in-person instruction. In addition, Governor Murphy has given guidance that school districts can provide lunch to students as long as students are socially distanced 6 feet. Building principals are currently working through plans to meet these requirements, and we hope to have an announcement soon about returning to school for the normal school day with lunch. In other great news to celebrate, Dr. Janasco, our guidance director, recently shared with me some recently impressive college admission acceptance decisions from the class of 2021. We have Princeton University, 3 students going to Cornell University, Brown University, Georgetown University, Duke University, University of South Carolina, UC Berkeley, University of Virginia, Boston College with 4 students, Washington University in St. Louis, Wesleyan College, Wake Forest University, Washington and Lee, Northeastern University, Villanova University, and George Washington University. And finally, I am pleased to announce that the hockey team has won the Kelly Cup. I would like to introduce Coach Michael Cristatello to introduce our athletes as they are honored by the Board of Education and Mr. Reinstein.
Okay. So we're going to
You
honor-
got ish.
Mike, good evening. How are you tonight?
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Dr. Varley, thank you for the introduction.
Great. Mike, I'm going to read the resolution honoring the hockey team, and then we'll ask you to speak about the team this season. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Whereas the varsity ice hockey cooperative team of Governor Livingston, New Providence, High School, located in Berkeley Heights, New Providence, New Jersey, consists of Jordan Baum, Jackson Benward, Shane Cook, Brandon Cucharo, Matthew Dorada, Colin DeCroy, Daltry Ferrigno, Brandon Fallis, Sebastian Gratzen, Tommy Hoy, Philip Christophus, Brian Kramer, Franklin Markle, Jack Norton, Brady Silverman, Drewska Tarzak, Josh Vaidman, Matthew Wallen, and Jimmy Wellen. Whereas the team is coached by head coach Mike Crisatello, assistant coach Matthew Altamir, and volunteer coaches Ryan Daly and Travis DeLello. Whereas the varsity ice hockey team of Governor Livingston New Providence High Schools earned the title of 2021 Kelly Cup champions by defeating Cranford High School by the score of 5-4 in double overtime on March 4th at the Cody Arena. Whereas the Highlanders completed the season with a record of 12 wins, 1 loss, and a statewide ranking of number 18. Whereas the GL New Providence also won the Jersey Interscholastic Ice Hockey Kelly Division regular season, whereas the 2021 Kelly Cup is only the second such title in the history of Governor Livingston School's ice hockey program. Whereas the team, so each of its members contribute individually to the team during its championship run, whereas Berkeley Heights, Mountainside, and New Providence communities are very proud of the accomplishments of this team and its coaches. Therefore, be it resolved that Berkeley Heights Board of Education members applaud the 2021 varsity ice hockey team and congratulate the student athletes and coaching staff on their outstanding championship season. Be it resolved that a signed and sealed copy of this resolution be framed and kept on display at Governor Livingston High School, signed and sealed this 8th day of April of the year 2021. Mike, I'll turn it over to you. All I can say, Mike, is I didn't attend the final ice hockey game, but I did see many videos of the final play, and I was excited sitting in my living room watching it, and I probably replayed it 4 or 5 times the night it happened. I don't know who posted it. I suspect a parent, but I knew the game was going on. It was exciting to know that we got to the finals, and it was exciting to watch a win in double overtime. I can't even imagine what it was like for you and the team to be there. So tell us about the team, tell us about the season, and tell us about the exciting championship.
Well, even getting to hear you talk about it one more time kind of brings back the goosebumps, that feeling that we got in that moment. For a very different year, we still managed to find a very special component to our program, our team, and our success. I think everyone in the program, parents, players, coaches, we're all very nervous going into the season. Typically our season starts in the months of November, and as closer we got, the dates kept getting pushed back, and we had this level of uncertainty, not knowing what was in front of us and what was going to come of our actual season. With the excitement, knowing we had a special team that had the capability of doing something remarkable for our program. Being able to get started and get on the ice and to just go game to game, finding success through the entire season, finding 12 wins, only 1 loss, and pretty much filling out what we were allowed to for a full schedule this season, which is a remarkable feat within itself. Finding a way to push through the adversity that this team endured, being willing to sacrifice the parents, the players, the coaches, knowing that we needed to do everything we could to keep ourselves going through our schedule and every team that we wanted to face and wanted to beat. I couldn't be more proud of everybody that's involved, from everyone from the Board of Education, allowing us to have this opportunity this year, to our administration for supporting us and helping us through these times, from our parents being willing and flexible to all of the changes of the schedules, whether it be cancellations from teams because of the pandemic, or the consistent snow that wanted to find us every Monday in February. It really took a lot of adversity. And for me, I feel that all athletes and student athletes at the high school level, this is the experience for these young men and women to be able to experience adversity and learn how to find a path through it. All right. Learn from your failures, learn from your mistakes, and learn through the struggles that you have. And this couldn't have been more of a season to show for it. And I couldn't be more proud of everybody's effort that they put forth to find success this season in the win and loss column, but also find the consistency and the sacrifice to keep us on the ice and to get to that special moment that you were talking about. going into that final game, win or lose, it was the last game of the season, and we sure made it interesting going to a double overtime. And it was at that moment one of the longest games in high school hockey history up until the following night when there was another triple overtime game up in North Jersey. But to come out on top and to know what was put in to get to that moment in this year through all of the uncertainty that we've experienced and the adversity that we faced, it really put the cherry on top. And I couldn't be more proud of our team, our parents, our community for coming together and helping us get to that point.
Great, Mike. Thanks again. Thanks to you again. Everything you mentioned, difficult season, pandemic, all the challenges that you had. Congratulations to you. I'd love to welcome you back next year with another Kelly Cup. We've only got 2, but why not back-to-back? Why not back-to-back championships? So to all the returning players who are coming back, I don't know how many seniors you're losing this year versus incoming freshmen that you'll get next year, but thanks for everything you've done. Good luck to you in the off season, and we'd love to welcome you back next year with another championship. Thanks again, Mike.
Thank you. We're looking forward to next season, and we're going for the big one when it's available to us.
Sounds good. We're going to continue with the next part of the superintendent's report. Let me just make one administrative comment. Dr. Varley will be sharing the full day kindergarten presentation. The presentation is now posted up on our website. So if you go to our website, you can go access that. So you can obviously watch it on the Zoom. It's also available for you to download. So when we get to the questions and answer period, if anybody wants to access that to better frame their question, you'll have the opportunity to get it. Again, it's posted now on our website. Dr. Varley? Mike, can you just promote Mary Beth and Annie? Okay, I see Annie's here. And let's see, do we just have Mary Beth? Okay, I see Mary Beth is promoted also. Okay, got Annie. And we have Mary Beth. We got both of them. Oh, Mike, can you also promote the podium?
Okay.
Okay, we're good. Dr. Varley?
Get to the presentation. Of course, it's no longer up. Hold on one second. Okay, good evening, everyone. This is the moment you have been waiting for. Reimagining K-5 education, which talks about redistricting, but making sure we implement full day kindergarten. I would like to take a moment to thank Ms. Felizzola, who has worked diligently on this presentation, Ms. Lopez, and Ms. Corley, who have spent a lot of time with me working through this. We will get started. So if you look at our agenda tonight, you can follow along with us online. We do have the presentation posted on our website. So we're going to go through our overview and background, our current school configuration and concerns, recommendation and benefits, our scenarios, and our next steps. So our problem statement is basically that Mary Kay McMillan does not have the capacity to house all of our kindergarten and first grade students when the district implements our comprehensive full day kindergarten in September 2021. That isn't the only problem we have. We also know that we have inequity amongst our 4 school buildings. So when we met together and we started working on this presentation, we came up with 5 guiding principles that directed us through this process. I can assure you, we have multiple iterations, over a 32-page spreadsheet of multiple scenarios we have come up with, and we are only presenting the 5 that could possibly work. So our guiding principles are to make schools developmentally appropriate for like-aged children and provide equitable services for all students. And I want to make sure everyone understands equity here is not talking about race. We are talking about the same programs, the same policies, the same services for all students. We are going to optimize the efficiency of our resources by balancing enrollment across all of our elementary schools, provide for future growth given the new housing developments. We have over 1,000 developments coming in the next few years, and I can assure you they will have children in those houses. Minimize the change impact where possible for students changing schools, and maximize where possible the number of students who can walk to school. So you look at our timeline of discussions for full day kindergarten. Way before I was even here, in October of 2014, the Board of Education started a feasibility study about full day kindergarten. Then in 2015 to 2018, there were many discussions, again, before I was part of Berkeley Heights, and parent feedback. In March of 2009, the board presented and had a discussion on the case for full day kindergarten, a pilot versus universal free kindergarten for parents and students. In November of 2019, when I was here, we announced a pilot full day kindergarten for the 2021 school year and talked about full day kindergarten for 2021-2022. In October of 2020, we postponed the referendum due to the pandemic and postponed universal full day kindergarten to 2022 to 2023. In February 4th of 2021, we announced full day kindergarten for the 2020-2021 school year. And then on April 8th, which is tonight, we are doing the Board of Education full day kindergarten presentation with options and scenarios. And then on April 14th, we will hold our first town hall. After that town hall, we will send out a survey for parents to give us feedback on which scenario they would like to choose. On April 22nd of 2021, we will have our second town hall for parents and community members. And then on April 29th, there will be a Board of Education discussion and vote. I'm going to turn it over now to Annie Corley, and she's going to talk about the history of Hamilton Terrace.
Good evening, everyone. I feel like I've been talking about full day kindergarten for many, many years. So here we go. So reorganization and reimagining our school configuration is not new to Berkeley Heights. During the deregionalization in 1997, Berkeley Heights became a K-12 district, and as a way to relieve overcrowding at the elementary schools, opened Hamilton Terrace, which had been leased to the Union County Ed Services Commission, was known as Westlake School. In 1997, Hamilton Terrace Early Childhood Center, now known as Mary K. McMillan, opened its doors, welcoming all the district's kindergarten students and expanding the following school year to include first graders and preschoolers. Change is never easy. There was a great deal of apprehension among teachers and staff, and not overwhelming support from the community in implementing this new school structure. What was viewed as dismantling our neighborhood schools, siblings attending different schools, and busing many of our youngest students was not looked on favorably by the public. Once the Early Childhood Center opened and the benefits of such a facility became clear, the tide began to turn and public opinion was swayed. Playgrounds designed for younger children were installed, assemblies and events were planned with a deliberate focus on this age group, and the culture of the school soon became to reflect what we know as best practice in early childhood education. Across the state, MKM has become a model for other districts and is frequently visited by colleagues from the Department of Ed, professional organizations, and universities. Change does not come quietly or without friction. We are now poised to expand this early childhood model and reimagine our elementary schools to the betterment of all of Berkeley Heights students. Go to the next slide, please. Are we up with that slide?
Yes.
Okay. As you can see in this slide, there's a tremendous disparity in enrollment numbers across the 4 schools. With our current configuration, we are unable to implement a universal full-day kindergarten program, as both Dr. Varley and Mr. Reinstein has mentioned. A full-day K program is a much-needed component of a comprehensive preschool through 12 school district. It's important to consider more than physical space and number of students when discussing disparity in enrollment. One must consider the differences in expectations for staff and accessibility to students in various buildings. For example, at one school, a school counselor is limited in her ability to connect with 320 students, while such a relationship is more easily at a school with 177 students, reading specialists, interventionists, and even the principal. There is a significant disparity between school buildings. Dr. Varley will discuss this in greater detail throughout the presentation. Next slide. We can talk about numbers and make comparisons, but as a visual learner, my learning style prefers using pictures, charts, and graphs. When you look at this bar graph, it clearly demonstrates the disparity between schools and attests to the compelling need to make some change. As we continue the presentation, you will be presented with two scenarios. Both will create more balanced enrollment across our schools, provide full-day kindergarten, and in turn positively impact our elementary students for years to come. Dr. Varley?
So our current concerns are that we have insufficient space to implement full-day kindergarten within our current school configuration. We want to maintain our commitment to developmentally appropriate practices in early childhood education and focus on our enrollment disparity in elementary schools, which leads to lack of equity in services provided amongst the buildings and our inability to maximize the use of staff. Example given here is our specialist. The greatest concern is lack of equity. And I'm going to repeat what equity means again. Equity means that fair policies, programs, and practices are put into place to ensure that every single child has the academic, social, and emotional supports needed to succeed. In essence, they are all on the same playing field. Our goal is to ensure that staffing and class sizes are more consistent across all 4 buildings. Each support staff member has an equitable schedule to service the maximum number of students. Planning time is equitable so that teachers can design common lessons and assessments to support student learning, and elementary principals supervise similar number of staff and support similar numbers of students and families. And our facilities and resources are realized to their full potential. So when I talk about lack of equity, I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So Ms. Corley gave you an example of a counselor, and I'm going to talk about a reading specialist. Let's use an example reading specialist at Mountain Park who would meet with 20 students per day, while a reading specialist at Mary K. McMillan could see up to 40 students a day. Thus, the students at Mountain Park receive more individualized instruction than those at Mary K. McMillan. This holds true for school counselors, psychologists, CST, and other specialists and support staff. On the flip side of that, let's say that Mary Kay had a 4th grade class that had 48 students in that as a grade level, 48 students. I would not, and the board and I would not open a new section for 48 students. We would hold 2 classes of 24 class students in a class. On the flip side of that part, if Hughes has 76 students, I would not hold just 3 sections with 76. I would do 4, and that would be a 19 students in one class, thus creating Mountain Park having 24 students in a class and Hughes having 19. If you look at our enrollment sheets across grade levels right now, we have that disparity throughout our buildings where there are large class sizes in some grade levels and small class sizes in other grade levels. Based on the data, and I can tell you, I have spoken to multiple early childhood and elementary education professors, and they talk about if you walked into a district and you could build it from scratch, you would have specialists in each grade band, such as K to 2, pre-K to 2, and 3 to 5, 6 to 8, and 9 to 12. We are doing the specialist model 6 to 8 and 9 to 12. However, we are not doing the specialist model in our 2 to 5 schools, and we need to focus on best practices. So based on data, research, and the best interests of the students of Berkeley Heights Public Schools, the superintendent recommends the creation of 2 K to 2 schools, Mary Kay and William Woodruff, and 2 3 to 5 schools, Mountain Park and Thomas Hughes. The discussion will occur tonight and at the 2 upcoming town hall meetings as to whether this recommendation will be implemented next school year or in 2 school years. And I'm going to turn it over to Mary Beth Kopez for the next portion.
Good evening, everyone. I'm happy to discuss why we strongly believe that the K2 and 3-5 model is the best structure for our district moving forward, and specifically the curricular benefits of that model. First and foremost, it's recognized by many leaders in the field as best practice. There's a preponderance of evidence to support this structure. Many researchers, such as Doug Reeves, a Harvard University distinguished author, Ellie Drago Severson from Columbia Teachers College, Fountas Pinnell, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, all discuss how early childhood education and interventions improve student learning, as well as the health and well-being of young children. Norwood, who has conducted cross-sectional studies, have shown that when students are placed in K2 young primary elementary schools, superior student achievement is observed, not only in those early grades, but also in grades 4 and 5. Obviously, it's because the students have a strong foundation, which allows them to succeed as they move up the grades. The New Jersey Department of Education even recognizes these grade bands as best practice. For example, we have our learning standards grouped that way according to K2 and 3-5 bands. Our new New Jersey Student Learning Standards for Social Studies and our computer science frameworks are banded this way. When grades pre-K through 2 and 3 through 5 are grouped together, there's a school-wide focus on the developmental and educational needs of those specific age bands. One example of this is professional development work that we're doing and that we're engaged in. As many of you know, we have a partnership with Columbia Teachers College, and their staff developers are even trained in this way. We have pre-K through 2 experts who work with our K through 2 teachers, and then we have our staff developers who are 3 through 5 experts, and they work with our teachers in grades 3 through 5. So in our grade 2 through 5 schools, we actually have 2 different staff developers working with our staff. One who has the second grade focus, and then another one who has the grades 3 through 5 focus. Also, school routines, assemblies, and activities can be more grade and age focused. For example, students in grades pre-K through 2 will not have routines interrupted during the administration of district testing or state testing. When we house grades pre-K through 2 together, it allows for the focus to be on developmentally appropriate practices. You've heard that phrase used a lot. Integrated curriculum and instruction, as well as focus on early literacy and numeracy skills. Whereas when we focus on grades 3 through 5, and they are housed together, it fosters vertical and horizontal content-specific articulation to address standards in preparation for state testing. I'm sure many of you have heard the phrase that in grades pre-K through 2, children are learning to read, and then by grades 3 through 5, children are reading to learn. The new configuration will foster more staff with specialized knowledge and expertise in the specific developmental stages of educational growth. For example, intervention sources will be focused rather than spread across greater grade spans. And because the focus and the concentration of services such as special education expand and provide appropriate services for the smaller range of grade levels. And finally, the structure will allow for common planning periods to promote curricular consistency across grade levels. This is very important to us because we will have schedules that are a bit more flexible because they only cover 3 grade levels. Teachers will be able to plan together, and we're very happy about the consistency that will be created. Next slide.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Bellazola for staffing, facilities, and cost benefits.
Overall, our goal was to establish schools with balanced total enrollments. We looked at many configurations, as Dr. Varley mentioned, to come up with this balance. It was a big jigsaw puzzle, and we just kept on massaging it to get the best allocation of students that we could. The reason for this is balanced enrollments allow us to more efficiently utilize our buildings and our staff. As Dr. Varley mentioned, this will allow us to create classes with equal or as equal as we can get class sizes. One school won't have 23 students per class, while another school has 17 students per class. In the recommended configuration, related arts teachers and special teachers will be able to focus their lessons on a more cohesive group of students, either the K-2 group or the 3 to 5 level. This will give the teachers more focus, and they'll be able to concentrate on a group of students that is more cohesive in where they are in their learning. Currently, we have staff share between buildings, and these staff spend a portion of their day traveling from one school to another. The recommended scenarios will reduce the need for teachers to travel and will allow them to spend more time with their students in the buildings they're assigned to. Teachers who teach the same grade will have more opportunities to collaborate with colleagues and share resources and best practices. So by concentrating the teachers within 2 schools with the same grades, we'll have more people who can work together and share their knowledge regarding the curriculum and what is best practices for the students. Professional development will also be more effective, as Mrs. Cope has explained. Much of it is geared to the K-2 level and the 3 to 5 level. So when we have professional development opportunities for our teachers, they will be more effective, and the teachers and the staff developers will be able to work together. In reference to classroom utilization, there is a noticeable difference when you walk through the schools. One school has empty unused classrooms, and other schools have staff sharing spaces. In certain instances, teachers are providing small group instruction lessons in carved out spaces from larger classrooms. Receiving small group instruction in this type of environment reduces the quality and effectiveness for the students who are receiving those services. Another benefit, which was a result of all of this, was a savings in transportation costs. Later in the presentation, we have a slide that shows the differences in transportation costs for each scenario, and we'll summarize that later.
Okay, so we did not share with you every single scenario that we have looked at because we would be here until next Tuesday. So we chose 5 of the scenarios that would possibly work. We talked about, and Mr. Reinstein mentioned this, that same structures today with no full day kindergarten. And we know, if you look at research, that a student who falls behind in 1st grade without interventions will stay behind. We know that other states are looking at universal pre-K, and we are looking at universal full day kindergarten. We need to make sure we are giving our students the foundation so that they have the ability to be successful. And then I'm going to go into more detail in scenarios 2 through 5. If you look at scenario 2, this is something that was talked about years ago before I was a member of the Berkeley Heights Public School District, and that's just moving the first grade down. And we have Mary Kay McMillan with preschool to kindergarten, and then we have the 3 schools, Hughes, Mountain Park, and Woodruff, with 1st through 5. First of all, we don't fix our enrollment disparity. So we continue with the equity issue that we have. And this is not developmentally appropriate. We would have 11-year-olds in the same building with 6-year-olds. And if you look at it, it reduces our common planning time. And we know how important the whatever I need period is that we have in those elementary schools. That would basically be gone. So our students would not receive the intervention services. So this is not something that we would wholeheartedly embrace. If you also look at it, you see that our school with the largest capacity is Woodruff with 380 students. And in this scenario, it would have 219 students. Hughes is over capacity at 321 students, which is 1 student, but in the end, we know more students move in. If you look at Mary Kay McMillan, we would have 207 students total. 58 of that 207 students would be pre-K. So just wanted you to take a look. I'll pause for a minute so you can see the number discrepancies there. And just to show you that we would not fix our equity issue and we still have an enrollment disparity. So then we talked about scenario 3, and this is where we move the Murray Hill neighborhood to Woodruff. And we have the configuration is Mary Kay McMillan is preschool to kindergarten, and Hughes, Mountain Park, and Woodruff are grades 1 through 5. We still redistrict a little. We just move 1 neighborhood, and we do get a more balanced approach here. However, we're still not developmentally appropriate. We are not addressing our equity. We are addressing our equity issues, but we are not addressing the developmentally appropriateness, which across the board research shows we need specialized schools. It still reduces our common planning time and our win periods, and we have an inefficient use of our staff. And I will show you the bar graph, which I, like Ms. Corley, am a very visual learner. We have disparity in enrollment with Mary Kay McMillan only having 207 students. And if you can see, the others are about on the same level there, but still not developmentally appropriate. So I'm going to leave that for a second so you can take a look at it. We move to scenario 4, which is 2 early childhood centers. Would be developmentally appropriate, 2 grade 3 to 5 buildings, which would be elementary schools. And we look at Mary Kay McMillan preschool to grade 2, Woodruff kindergarten to grade 2. Grade 5 has the option to stay should they not want to move on to Hughes and Mountain Park. And Hughes and Mountain Park are grades 3 to 5. If you look at the enrollments, yes, they are a little off. If you look at Hughes is higher. And one thing I noticed when I looked at the enrollment of our incoming 5th grade, we have a larger 5th grade, this incoming 5th grade for next year than we do currently. So it would bump Hughes up a little bit over the remaining schools. Every year we have what we call baby boom grades. This year's 9th grade is a larger 9th grade than last year's, significantly larger than last year's 9th grade. So if you take a look at the benefits of this, we have almost balanced enrollment. We leave room for the incoming housing developments. And one thing, if you look at the housing developments, the majority of them are coming in on the Mary Kay McMillan Mountain Park side, and that would leave room for growth over in Mary Kay McMillan, in Woodruff and Hughes. Students in all buildings will have equitable access to all services. We will efficiently use our staff. It reduces the travel between buildings and schools, and we have common planning and consistent instruction. I have talked to multiple parents in my 1.5 years that I've been here who complain about the lack of consistent instruction across the 4 elementary schools. Our enrollment numbers above do not include the remaining 5th grade at Woodruff, just so you're aware. I just want to make sure that's clear. If you take a look at our enrollment across the board in our bar graph, again, Mary Kay McMillan has 283 total students. 58 of those students are pre-K. And then you have Woodruff with 238, Hughes with 276, and Mountain Park with 230. And I'll leave that slide up here for a second so you can keep a look at it, keep looking at it. So moving on to scenario 5. Scenario 5 is basically moving to scenario 4, but in a 2-year transition period. I know we've had some parents say that they want at least 1 more year of normalcy before we make these changes. So if you take a look at it, for next year, this is year 1. Year 1, Mary Kay McMillan would be pre-K to 1. Woodruff would be K and grades 3 to 5. Hughes and Mountain Park grades 2 to 5. If you notice, Woodruff would not have a second grade. Those first graders would leave Mary Kay McMillan and go to either Hughes or Mountain Park, so it reduces a transition for them. And if you take a look, we still have an enrollment disparity, but it is for 1 year. We know we have to fix our equity issue, and we can either do it in 1 year or we can do it in 2 years. Take a look at our slide here. We have Mary Kay McMillan with 283 students, and I realize it's the same number of students that were in scenario 4 for Mary Kay McMillan, but oddly enough, the numbers add up to 283 for pre-K, K and 1, or pre-K to 2 for Mary Kay McMillan. 58 of those students are pre-K students, and then you see Woodruff with 195, Hughes with 267, and Mountain Park with the largest number at 282. So I'll turn it over to Donna again for the transportation cost.
When we looked at all of the scenarios, we looked at staffing, we looked at all aspects of the scenarios. And one of the things that we consistently looked at was the transportation costs. So you can see here the transportation costs for each of the 5 scenarios. The scenario 1, which is our current year, the costs are the highest at $390,000. Each of the following scenarios, you can see transportation cost savings. And admittedly, one of the big reasons that there will be savings is that we'll be eliminating the midday kindergarten bus routes. There are currently 6 routes associated with a half-day kindergarten program. And based on the shifts in the grade levels and the neighborhoods for each of the scenarios is the reason that some of these numbers are varying. The greatest savings are with scenario 4, where we're cutting our costs in half, but with each of the scenarios, there will be savings. Overall, the savings range from $120,000 to $180,000.
So let's talk about how we decided to do this redistricting consideration. We began the process by splitting the town in half with Snyder Avenue as the center point. It's the way Berkeley Heights does the recycling process. So then we started looking at the map, and we wanted to look at the guiding principles and minimize the change impacts, as well as maximize the amount of students who can walk to school. And we took a look at Spring Ridge. Spring Ridge, they open their front door and they look right at Hughes. So it did not make sense to have those students turn around and then probably be bused, or their parents have to drive them to school to Mountain Park. So Spring Ridge will stay where they are at Woodruff and move to Woodruff and Hughes. Sutton and the Hampton neighborhoods, we kept them at Woodruff and Hughes to make a more balanced, balance our enrollment numbers there as well. So here's our map. You can see the left is Mary Kay McMillan and Mountain Park, and the right is Hughes and Woodruff. It's all divided down Snyder except for a few neighborhoods. You take a look at what we have here and what we've moved. So we have right here in front of CMS, you have a school that would normally, this neighborhood would normally go to Hughes, but they will now go to Mary Kay McMillan and Mountain Park. Then you take a look at Springfield, which is behind the hardware store. They normally go to Woodruff. They would now go to Mountain Park. And we kept everything else basically the same as much as we possibly could. So you can take a look at that. I'll leave it up for a moment so you can process the map. And again, this is on our website if you want to take a look at it. So our biggest changes will be the students who face or are near CMS, Columbia Middle School, and the students who are behind the hardware store. Those students will be moved. So in our student impact slide, rising fifth grade students at Woodruff and Hughes will have the option to stay at their current school for fifth grade or move to Hughes or Mountain Park, regardless of the 1 or 2 year transition period. Of the K-5 students across all schools, less than 20%, basically 1 out of every 5 students, will be attending a different school. That means the school they're not currently attending versus our current model. Children may not attend the same school as their siblings or the school they anticipated on attending. So our next steps, we have the town hall forum on Wednesday, April 14th, which is next week, and Thursday, April 22nd. After the town hall forum on April 14th, I will be sending out a survey to parents to determine their choice and give us feedback on scenario 4 or scenario 5. My recommendation will be based on the feedback from the community. It will then be recommended to the Board of Education, and their decision will happen at the April 29th board meeting. We will have construction of new bathrooms for our kindergarten classrooms. The Department of Education mandates that kindergarten classrooms must have a bathroom within the classroom or at least within the line of sight. And we will determine teacher and administrative personnel changes to support the recommended option. And we will continue communicating with our community. And I'm going to take my screen share off, turn it over to Mr. Reinstein for the student flow scenario.
Okay. What I'm about to share with you is the exact same information that Dr. Brawley just shared in a slightly different format. And this is formatted to look at the student flows. So what you have here is scenario 4 in the first year, which is September of 2021. And this involves the redistricting in 2021. So rising kindergartners, young children who are today currently in preschool, would either go to Mary Kay or Woodruff based on the map of the community. Rising first graders, these will be young children today who are either at Mary Kay or in a private kindergarten, would do the same thing. They would go to Mary Kay or to Woodruff. Rising second graders, students who are in first grade today, again, would go to Woodruff or to Mary Kay. Rolling forward, again, this is still with this scenario 4, and this is in September 21 with redistricting. So students who are currently at Woodruff would either go to Hughes or to Mountain Park. Most of them would go to Hughes. The group that would go to Mountain Park, again, is the group that lives currently behind the hardware store, who are currently at Woodruff and would go to Mountain Park. The same thing for Hughes, slightly different neighborhood. So the rising 3rd and 4th grade students who are currently at Hughes would stay at Hughes or go to Mountain Park. Again, those students are the ones who currently live opposite Columbia Middle School. And lastly, the 3rd and 4th grade students who are at Mountain Park would stay at Mountain Park. If we go forward in 5th grade, and here's the exception that I talked about in my opening remarks and with Dr. Brawley, for rising 5th grade students, and these are students who would be spending their last year at the elementary school, Woodruff students would go to Woodruff, Hughes students would go to Hughes, Mountain Park would go to Mountain Park. It's the important footnote is right here on the bottom. There will be an option for rising 5th grade students at Woodruff, and rising 5th grade students at Hughes will have the option to stay at their current school and reduce the number of transitions. One of the areas of feedback that we got, and one of our, it didn't rise up to the level of a guiding principle, but when we talked about minimizing the student impacts and minimizing the number of transitions, by allowing these rising fifth graders to stay at their current school for the fifth grade year, we minimize the student impact and we reduce the number of transitions. So that's scenario number 4. Let's move on to scenario number 5. This one's a little bit more detailed because it covers 2 years. So this is scenario 5 in year 1, where the majority of the redistricting will happen in September 22, which is year 2. So this option has the rising kindergartners, again, those students coming from preschool, would go to Mary Kay and Woodruff based on the community map. But that is the only group that would move to the new structure. All the other students would stay where they are. So rising first graders, again, the young students who are at Mary Kay or pre-K or private school, would go to Mary Kay because we would not be moving the first graders. Rising second graders, students who are currently in first grade and rising from Mary Kay, would go to Hughes or to Mountain Park. You'll note on the bottom here, for those students that would have gone to Woodruff, we will not be sending them to Woodruff in the first year for the same reason I mentioned in the previous slide. For us to minimize the number of transitions, minimize the student impact, those students would go to either Hughes or Mountain Park because that will become their home for their 3rd through 5th grade elementary year. So again, another example where we're minimizing the number of transitions, minimizing the student impact for students. If we go forward, again, this is still scenario 5, year 1. And because there's no change for rising 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, no change. Woodruff goes to Woodruff, Hughes to Hughes, Mountain Park to Mountain Park. So again, scenario 5, year 1, I'll go backwards for a second. The really only change is the rising kindergartners we'll implement full day kindergarten, and we will split up. Mary Kay, McMillan, and Woodruff will each get half of the rising kindergartners. But for first grade, second grade, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, in year 1, no redistricting and very, very minimal change. Let's roll the clock forward. This is now scenario 5, year 2. So this is in September 22, roughly a year and a half from now. This is when the majority of redistricting would take place. So this is the year 2 of scenario 5. No change here. Rising kindergartners would still get split. Rising first graders who previously were at Mary Kay and Woodruff would stay where they are. So Mary Kay students would stay there. Woodruff students would stay there as well. Rising second graders would go from Mary Kay McMillan to Woodruff or Mary Kay, again, because those are where our second grade students are housed. Then for the 3rd grade students, these are the rising 3rd grade students. Again, this is in year 2. Those students would go to Hughes or Mountain Park. And the reason for that is there's nobody at Woodruff. As I mentioned in the previous slide, in year 1, we didn't send any students to Woodruff, so there wouldn't be any students at Woodruff, minimizing the transition. So those students would go from Hughes to Hughes and from Mountain Park to Mountain Park. Again, that's for the 3rd grade students. Rising 4th grade students. Again, this is scenario 5, year 2. Again, and here's where you begin to see where the map and the redistricting comes in. So Hughes students, again, would either go from Hughes or they'd go to Mountain Park. Again, this is the students who live opposite Columbia. It's important to note the footnote at the bottom. The thickness of the arrows is done by design here. The thicker the arrow, the greater number of students. The reason that there's a thin arrow over here from Hughes to Mountain Park, as well as a thin arrow from going from Woodruff to Mountain Park, is those are a small number of students. Again, the Hughes community is the group that lives opposite Columbia, and this that I'm circling right here is the group behind the hardware store that is currently at Woodruff and goes to Mountain Park. Those are the 4th grade students. Again, Mountain Park, no change in 4th grade. The 5th grade students, again, as we said previously, there will be an option for rising fifth grade students, regardless of the scenario, in both scenario 4, which is a 1-year transition, and scenario 5, which is a 2-year transition. Rising fifth grade students will have the option to stay at the school that they were at. So Woodruff students could stay at Woodruff. Again, you see the footnote, as well as the same thing with Hughes. These slides are all posted on the deck. The hope was that these, I call them student flows. The hope is that this makes it easier for people to understand what scenario 4 and scenario 5 is. So you can track the movement of students both in year 1 for scenario 4, which is the only year we'd have it if we do a 1-year transition, as well as scenario 5, which has a 2-year transition. The other hope, of course, was that it's easier for you to find your student and find out, if there is an impact for them. We do realize that in the last, I think it's been about 45 minutes, we have shared a great deal of information with you, both in terms of what the options were, the benefits and the ideas behind them, and now these student flows that hopefully give you a better understanding of the different scenarios. We realize that it will take time for people to digest this, to form their questions, to ask questions, and to provide feedback. But again, our hope was to share with you as much information as we could, the background, and then these student flows. We're going to get to questions in a couple of minutes. I want to add my thanks to everybody that Dr. Varley thanks, and I will add my personal thanks to Dr. Varley. She has really brought this entire concept, as she mentioned, this was not a new concept when she came here. She inherited the concept of full day kindergarten, but she is the person who drove this administrative team to build these recommendations, understand the impacts, and work with educational experts to truly design, and we're in the process of, and we will implement a full day kindergarten solution that I know be a big step forward and a huge opportunity for us to improve educational excellence in Berkeley Heights. So, Dr. Varley, I assume that concludes your superintendent's report.
That is the end of my superintendent's report, and thank you very much for the acknowledgement.
You're welcome. We're going to do one or two little administrative items before we prepare to do the citizens hearing tonight. So with that, do any board members have liaison reports?
Yeah. You want to go? Just on March 22nd, the Truth and Racial Healing Task Force with the town met. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend, but they're working on an ordinance which is under review to really define what the group will do. They also met with the Maplewood South Orange Community Coalition on Race to get an introduction and see, get an introduction and overview of that program, and see if, if there was anything that they could glean from that. So there's more to come. And a cultural fair is being planned for the fall. And details will be, forthcoming. So that's really what's been going on. And they also introduced a new Berkeley Heights Police Department officers to the group who have been part of that committee. So that's it.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks, Troy. Anybody else? Robert? Hey, Robert, just come off mute.
The classic, I was on mute. Okay, I have two liaison reports. The first one is Environmental Commission Liaison Report. This past Monday, I attended the bi-monthly Environmental Commission meeting as the district's co-liaison to the Township Commission for the environment. The one thing that came up that CMS will have sort of a minor role in is, in case you don't know, as the residents of New Jersey rebuild their commitments to counter the effects of the storms, like Superstorm Sandy, the New Jersey Tree Recovery Campaign and the Arbor Day Foundation are wondering, and are bringing back the beauty of the tree line. These trees, which are seedlings acquired through the New Jersey Tree Recovery Campaign, will be distributed to Berkeley Heights residents on Saturday, April 24th from 11 to 2 in the Columbia Middle School semicircle out front. Due to COVID, it will be a drive-through. This is the same process that was followed last year. The seedlings are free, but you do have to sign up in advance, and directions for planning are included. Please complete the sign up on the township's website, not the school district's. Legal liaison report. Governor Murphy on April 15th announced that all New Jerseyans from age 16 and up will be eligible to receive vaccinations as of April 19th. This is a development that will affect more than 100,000 high school students in New Jersey. Second, there was a bill passed by the state Senate on school regionalization. On March 25th, the state Senate unanimously approved the bill, which would provide financial incentives for smaller districts to regionalize if merging makes sense for them. The bill would establish criteria for state-funded regionalization studies while making sure that any regionalization plan remains subject to voter approval, a key priority supported by the New Jersey School Boards Association. The New Jersey School Boards Association supports the bill because, quote, it represents a voluntary incentive-based opportunity for districts to explore regionalization and determine if it would be beneficial to their students and their communities. And lastly, this is just an update. No state, including New Jersey, will receive a waiver from the government, the federal government, with respect to the required student achievement tests. New Jersey, like other states, had requested that these tests be waived again this year due to COVID, as they had been last year. The federal government declined to go along with that. That's it.
Great, thanks, Robert. Are there any other liaison reports? Okay, not seeing any, we'll move on. Donna, facilities.
Our staff has used these 2 weeks to prepare the buildings for the return of students. They have serviced the HVAC units, installed desktop barriers, and did deep cleaning of the schools. Additionally, they worked on outside projects, did drainage repairs, and have been working with the township on field maintenance projects. That's it.
Okay, thanks, Donna. We'll now move into the citizens hearing portion of the meeting this evening. To be recognized, please ensure that your first and last name is listed on your device, and you should use your raise your hand function. I will unmute you, which will allow you to come off mute, address the board. Although not required, we prefer that you turn your camera on as well. You'll need to wait for a second. It does take a second for you to both unmute as well as turn on your camera. If you have more than one question, please ask all your questions at the beginning. The board recognizes students and staff members' right of privacy and therefore encourages all members of the public to address their concerns regarding individual students or staff members by meeting privately with the appropriate administrative staff. When addressing the board in a public forum, members of the public should refrain from identifying any students or staff member by name and are solely responsible for their comments, which could be considered defamatory or slanderous according to the laws of the state of New Jersey. Each resident will have 3 minutes to speak. Given the large number of residents who I expect to want to speak tonight and address the board, we will be keeping to that 3-minute guideline. With that, I see several people who have raised their hand. The first person says Tom or Daniel Francisco.
Hi, sorry, those are my kids.
I
Didn't realize.
I had a feeling that was 2 students who
Yep,
share a device.
2 students who share the same device. So I'm Sandy Francisco. I have 2 kids at Mary Kay McMillan, and we are very happy and fortunate. I just have a question. Thank you for all the work you've done, but it seems to me in scenario 4, we're addressing, the age appropriate learning, we're addressing equitable across the board, and it also seems to be the most cost saving, for the district. So my question is more why, and, specifically as a parent of a first grader, which would be rising second grader, it seems like option 5 wouldn't be getting us all of that, and specifically would be penalizing, any rising second grader that would not get, age appropriate learning for the sake of what specifically, especially when it's a more expensive option. So just trying to understand why we included option 5 specifically. And
Sure,
thank you
Betty.
for all the work.
Thank you. Thank you for your support. To address that, Betty, when we looked at doing this, both option 4 and option 5 get us to the same end game. The two different scenarios, one just gets us there a little bit more aggressively over 1 year, and one gets us there slightly less aggressively over 2 years. The reason for the two different options, there are a number of people who believe that when students come back to school in September, that they should come back to, and I cringe a little bit to say what is a normal September return to school, because I don't know that we have defined what the new normal is, but some people believe that students should come back to the same school with the same grade structure, with the same teachers and principals in the building, with the same recess, with the same group, and let them get back to a regular environment, the one that they left on March 11th of last year. Let them experience that, let them go back to what they're comfortable with, and delay the larger scale change of the redistricting until the second year. And that's the reason for option 5 versus option 4. There are plenty of other people who believe that scenario 4, which is the slightly more aggressive, and make the changes in September. So we are recommending the K-2 and 3-5 structure, but we're looking for the community input to see whether we get there over 1 year or 2 years. That's why we have the two scenarios.
So really, we're not really gaining anything in option 5 besides, just wanting somewhat normalcy for a
That's
handful of very
That's
loud
correct.
voices.
That's correct. The people, right? Scenario 5 provides a little bit more regular return in September. But thanks for your question. The next person I see on here just says IT. So I'm going to ask you to mute IT, and then I'm going to first ask you to give us your name. That's the person whose device says IT. I'll ask you one more time to unmute. If not, we'll come back to you. All right, I'm going to move on, and we'll come back to IT in a second. Victoria Mori. I'll unmute you, Victoria.
Good evening.
Victoria, good evening. How are you tonight?
Pretty good. How are you?
We are well. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. My name is Victoria Mowry, and I am a senior at GL. I understand that this meeting is heavily focused on the issues regarding full-day kindergarten, but I wanted to take a moment to address something that was brought up at last meeting. Dr. Varley has stated multiple times that the reason we were remote this week was a result of a handful of teachers traveling and needing to quarantine upon their return. She also stated in last month's meeting that she was hoping Governor Murphy would eliminate the mandatory quarantine period after traveling out of state, so there was no reason to close schools for a week. I was extremely concerned to hear that our district superintendent was willing to take the risk of opening schools after break and risking the spread of COVID-19. I wanted to share a small list of places in which students and families within the district traveled over break. Universal Studios, Walt Disney World, multiple beach towns in Florida, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Colorado, Arizona, California, Georgia, Vermont, Aruba, Cancun, Mexico, and St. Thomas. If schools had opened for in-person instruction this past Monday, who knows how many people may have been exposed to or contracted the virus. I believe the decision to go remote should not have been placed solely on the teachers of the district. Mr. McGovern stated in his remarks at the last meeting that over the past year, the teachers have gone from heroes to villains. Over my time in the district, I have not encountered one teacher who does not put their students and their education first. It's disheartening that many of the members of the community and their own superintendent do not support them in their decisions. These teachers have worked twice as hard over the last year to make sure that we all receive a quality education despite the current situation. My mother is a teacher in a fully remote district, and I see how challenging it is to keep the students engaged and to change their lessons to fit the virtual or hybrid platform. They should not be demonized for taking a much needed vacation. I applaud them for following the necessary quarantine guidelines because I can guarantee that many of the families within the district did not. The teachers in this district are incredible, and they need to stop being the ones to blame when in reality the blame should be placed on the families of the district. I would also like you to consider staying remote next week as well, because I have noticed that many individuals have extended their vacations or went on vacation this week since the district was remote. Thank you.
Victoria, thank you very much for your comments. The next person is just registered here as iPhone. It looks like you're unmuted, so the person whose device says iPhone, you can speak. Can you start out with just telling us your name?
Hi, how are you? My name is Anna Schwenk. I have a daughter who is currently in the sixth grade. I'm so sorry. In the second grade at William Woodruff. I am concerned. First she was in Mary Kay. From there, she lost her friends. Her friends went on to Hughes. So now she goes into a new school with COVID. It makes it even more stressful. So now she's in a new school in Woodruff, second grade. Now she's being told, because I do live behind Berkeley Hardware, that she's most likely going to go to Mountain Park next year. Okay. So now the majority of her friends are going to go to Hughes again. So now here's a child who lost all her friends in Mary Kay. Now she's going to lose all her friends again in William Woodruff. And now if we delay this 2 years, it's just going to make it harder on her. So I'm not happy with this, but delaying it isn't going to help either. It's just going to make it harder on her and harder for everyone else. And, if you look at other school districts outside of that, for instance, you have the Elizabeth School District, that they're claiming that you're saying that it's beneficial to separate second grade from third grade. If you look at the Elizabeth School District, they actually merged they did away with their middle school program, and they merged their middle school program with the elementary school program. And those kids excelled by being with the younger students. Their test scores went up, their standardized test scores went up, everything went up in that school district. So I'm not understanding, why are we separating these children?
Two thoughts for you, and thanks for sharing your comments. Number one is, we tried to, in the presentation, talk about developmentally appropriate, like-aged children being together, as well as providing more equity with our programs and services. And the K-2, 3 to 5 structure does improve that. Other districts who have other challenges and other building configurations have made other decisions. But for our district and our configurations, we believe this is the best configuration.
I understand that, but I think that you should.
Let me just finish, please. And we do understand that you live in one of the neighborhoods that has an additional transition, and we do understand that, and we are going to work with you and your students with that. But let me also just clarify one thing. Your young child today goes to Woodruff and obviously has a set of friends at Woodruff. And yes, where you live, they will be moving to Mountain Park. However, the entire community, I don't know what, I think you said your student was in second grade. So all of the second graders who live behind the hardware store, so whoever live in your local surrounding streets back there, all of those students will be traveling together to Mountain Park. So whoever his or her local friends are on the block, I do understand that's not all the kids at Woodruff, but all of the local students in your local neighborhood behind the hardware store will be going to Mountain Park together.
And I understand that. So why not work with the parents and say, listen, we understand this is going to happen, but speak to the parents also. If there's a possibility where my kid could go to Hughes, where there's probably another kid that's going to be forced to go to Hughes that would probably want to go to Mountain Park. We're really, what we're doing to our kids, we're not helping them, especially right now.
Thank you for your feedback. I understand, and I understand that your student is in the crosshairs of the change. And I can assure you, we have looked at dozens of scenarios and multiple neighborhood configurations to come up with what is the most equitable way to do this. And go back to our guiding principles: minimize the number of students who have to change, maximize the number of students who can walk to school. But it's not foolproof. It's not perfect. There is no perfect solution to this. So thank you for your comments. I will move on to Norma Ortega. Norma, you can unmute.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay. Norma, good evening. How are you tonight?
Good evening. I'm fine. Thank you. How's everyone? Thank you for allowing the parents to have a voice in this discussion, and thank you for your work. I'm speaking, I believe, on behalf of my daughter and my husband. My daughter is in second grade. She goes to Hughes. Tonight I'm speaking as a parent, but also as a psychologist. I've worked with a number of children. I don't believe we should undermine the fact that we have gone through a pandemic that has been very taxing on our children emotionally. To have more changes will be, I believe, very stressful for many children. And whether my child is affected by a redistricting decision or not, I am speaking to support the parents who are speaking for their child, who know they will be. I feel like our children, the discussion of full day care has been for years. Why do it when we have undergone so much trauma and stress due to a pandemic? Many people have lost loved ones. We have seen it on, TV. We're dealing with a lot. Minor changes will mean a lot. My daughter may not be moved, but her friends may be moved. My daughter just came back after remote virtual learning in February. Now she's in class. She's now developing friends and having a sense of normalcy. To change that, I think, is undermining her, sense of structure, stability, which she needs. So I feel like we need to put the children first, okay, all children, and keep that in mind. So thank you for allowing me the space to say that. And please consider parents' discussions and transparency is extremely important when making decisions that affect our children. Thank you.
Great, Norma, thank you very much for your comment. Marissa Schirik, hopefully I pronounced your name right.
Hi there.
Marissa, good evening. How are you tonight?
I'm well, thank you. I'm trying to, I don't know why I can't get my camera on, but anyway, I appreciate the board's work on this initiative. I feel strongly that full day kindergarten is needed. At the same time, I empathize with all the parents out there. My son is currently a kindergartner at Mary Kay. I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. So if I were to opt or show my support for the transition to happen in September of 2022, that would mean he would stay at Mary Kay for first grade, but then move to a different school only for second grade, and then move to a different school for third grade. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was understanding that correctly. That's it. Thank you.
Great. Great, Marissa, thank you very much. Tina Scorzafava. Tina, good evening.
Good evening, Doug. Good evening, all. Sorry, I am unable to start my video. Otherwise, I would.
No worries. No worries at all.
So I have two things that I'd like to address. First is I'd really love to see the data that embraces this bracket or grade bracket of developmentally appropriate education being 3 to 5 and K to 1 or K to 2 or what have you. I'd also love to see the data comparing our students' current population in terms of how they are faring regarding content retention and percentage of students meeting the benchmarks determined by the Common Core and so on. So to see whether or not that is already showing any kind of impact on our students currently and how we can address that. The second population of students that I have not heard about because for whatever reason is our growing special education population and how that will be handled by this redistricting, and specifically for the students who are already out of district placed. Do we have any current programs, ideas that are going to be more catering to those age brackets? And what would we do with our special needs students who need additional support, but would be in third grade, but needing first and second grade interventions?
Tina, thanks for your question. Let me break those down. For the first one, I would encourage you to drop a note to Mary Beth Kopaz. Mary Beth is our early child and elementary education leader, and I think she can share with you a lot of the research and the data behind that decision. So I know Mary Beth's on tonight, so just drop her a note tomorrow. I'm sure she'll respond and get you what you're looking for. Dr. Rowley, do you want to talk about the benchmark and the work we've done to think through this impact the special education population?
So I can definitely talk about the special education discussion. Right now, some of our special ed students, even though they're slated for Hughes, and if they have a specific, I guess, disability, they go to Mountain Park or they go to a different elementary school because we house those students together. That would not be affected in this process. Our students will get all the services they need. It'll be up to Michelle Gardner and her team on how they're going to distribute our special education kids, our more specialized special education kids. So I would assume some of our programs will stay at Mountain Park that include multiple grades. In the end, this is really under Michelle Gardner's expertise, not mine. And our out of district, that's another question I would shoot her an email for. We do have a low out of district enrollment. We do everything in our power to keep our students in district, but that is a good question for her.
I do my part and will most certainly follow up with Ms. Kopaz as well as Ms. Gardner, but I also think that those points should be integrated into your next plan for when you have a community hearing, so that way they can see the data themselves as well.
Great, Tina, thank you very much for your comments. Renee Cisla. Renee, good evening.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Renee Cisla, I'm a mom children in four.
Hey, Renee, can you get a little closer to your microphone or just speak maybe a little bit more louder?
Can you hear me better now?
Just a little bit. It's still kind of low.
Okay. You know what? Why don't you switch to the next person? I'll try to adjust my audio.
Okay. We'll come back to you, I promise. Sai Bargarvi. Sai, you can unmute.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you tonight?
Good. How are you?
Well.
So I have a couple questions. First is, have the scenarios that you just shared with us been approved by the board members?
So just give us all your questions and then we'll answer them. Give us all the questions up front.
So I would like to actually individually ask this question to all the board members. If they reviewed all the scenarios that are being presented to the parents right now, and if they had a chance to give any input and if they approved them before the survey is sent to us. Also, on the student impact slides, I'm not sure, I got disconnected for a bit because I was driving. And was there any student impact analysis done for special needs kids? And I would like to know between what changed between October 2020 and February 2021, because as of October 2020, we were not planning on going with full day kindergarten in 2021. But then there was an announcement that was made in early February 2021 that we're going to have full day kindergarten. We've got a commitment and we're going to have that in starting 2021. So where my question is, there was no public discussion by the board in terms of making this announcement. So I would like to know if there was a discussion that was had with the board members prior to making this announcement in Feb 2021, and on whose recommendation was this announcement made by our superintendent that we're going to go ahead with full day kindergarten in 2021? Was it a committee? Was it all the board members? And if there was any discussions held, the public wasn't privy to it. So do you think it's in violation of OPMA, Open Public Meetings Act, by the state of New Jersey? Those are my questions. Thank you.
Great, Sai, thanks very much. 3 different questions. I'm going to take them in reverse order. In terms of what changed from October to February, let me address that. In October, the board decided to postpone the referendum due to the COVID pandemic that we're facing. The board did not feel that going out to the residents in the community with the referendum was very sensitive at the time. Unfortunately, one of the unintended consequences of that was that we had to postpone full day kindergarten until 22-23. That was something that both the administrative team and the board were not happy about, because our community wants full day kindergarten. In between October and February, both the facilities committee met as well as the finance and facilities committee met to look at ways that we could implement full day kindergarten. Those committees met with the superintendent, and as you correctly stated, at that February 4th meeting, we made an announcement that all the board was supportive of when we discussed it live at that board meeting, that we would be bringing back full day kindergarten in February. Why did we make the announcement at that February meeting? We knew that if we were going to bring back full day kindergarten in September of 21, we knew that parents would want to know that, because if we didn't have it, they would be making deposits at other full day kindergarten schools. We actually called around to look at what the deposit and the refund policies were at all of those full day kindergarten programs, because the last thing we wanted to do was have a parent make a deposit, a non-refundable deposit, to something like Primrose or Westminster or any other program and be out that money. So we thought it was very important as early as we could, and people told us that if we got to them 6 months or 7 months in advance, which was what February was, that we would prevent that problem from happening. At the same time, we knew that even though we announced that full day kindergarten was coming in September, we didn't have our plans ready. And at that time, we knew we had to work on the plans. So from February 4th, that meeting on February 4th until tonight, we've been working on those plans. So that's what's changed between October and February. The answer to the student impact for special education, Dr. Varley and her team, along with Michelle Gardner, has looked at the special ed population where we have our child study teams, where our students are, and they are part of that team. We looked at, of course, regular education and special education. And as some of you know, Michelle Gardner is one of the best in the business, and her team supports that entire population. So they have looked at the impacts. If you have a specific question about either your child or broadly about what we're doing with special education, I am quite sure that Michelle Gardner can answer your question. As opposed to your first question, if I could ask all the board members to go off mute, I will call on you one at a time to go off mute. And Sai asked, a specific question. Were you aware of and approved the scenarios that were there? I think for the most part, it's a yes or no question. Were you aware of and did you approve the scenarios that were presented? I'm going to do it how I see you on the screen. So Jordan, you're up first. You want to comment on that, Jordan?
Yeah, it's a yes and yes for me, Doug.
Great, thanks, Jordan. Chris?
Yes, I'm aware of all the scenarios. As far as approving anything, I don't think we're approving anything until April 29th.
Great, thank you. Angela?
Yes, I'm aware of all the scenarios, but just like Chris, the approval hasn't taken place until April 29th. We're still interested in feedback from parents and town halls and all that information. So as yet, no.
Yeah,
Approval hasn't been done.
And let me clarify that before I go around the room to Mike and Joy and Robert. So awareness of the scenarios that were included in the deck, all of the board members are aware, as we said in the deck, that the eventual vote will be on April 29th. Keep going, Mike.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to that. No, yes, I was aware of the scenarios. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Joy.
Yes, aware of the scenarios, but again, like Angela said, waiting for town halls and other input before finalizing any judgment.
Great, thank you. Robert.
Yes, I was aware of the scenarios before tonight. I haven't really provided any input that at all. And I'm just waiting until the vote, the evening of the vote.
Great, thank you. And Helen.
Yes, I'm aware of all the scenarios. There's been no formal approval.
Great, thank you very much. Renee, hopefully I have, Sai, thank you for your questions.
I have one follow-up question. So basically, the board made the announcement that full day kindergarten will be implemented in 2021, but the board didn't approve it. So without the board's approval, the board of the elected representatives approval, we made the announcement that we're going to make full day kindergarten happen.
Yeah, so let me address follow up to your last questions. So yes, at that February 4th discussion, the board actively announced with all the board members in attendance and with discussion that we did that. Let me address the last piece of that before I move on to the next person. You brought up the Open Public Meetings Act. There was no violation at all of the Open Public Meeting Act at all. Sai, thank you for your question. Renee, hopefully you're back, Renee, and we can hear you a little bit better now.
Yes, I'm back. Can you hear me better now?
Oh, much better, Renee. Thank you very much. Now we can hear you crisp and clear.
Perfect. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate the engagement, the prep, the presentation. So I'm a current mom of a 4th and 7th grader. I am a taxpayer. I'm a 20+ year project manager in clinical research. So I appreciate that this is a challenge. It's a huge undertaking and it's a problem that we need to solve. Couple of questions. So stakeholder engagement is huge, right? And I just want to ask how the parents will be able to help engage in the decision-making for the April 29th vote, I believe. Will there be a survey? I know there's town halls, but that's Q&A. I've heard a lot of questions today that were just asked and weren't necessarily answered. So how will the Board of Ed kind of address the questions that were posed? And how will the Board of Ed kind of address the wishes of the parents who, were at the core of what we're deciding on here?
Great, Renee, thanks for your question. So as we stated, and it's in one of the slides in the deck, there will be a survey going out to all of the stakeholders who are directly impacted by this, and all of those stakeholders will be surveyed, and they will have a chance to indicate their preferred scenario, whether it be scenario 4, which is the 1-year transition, or scenario 5, which is the 2-year transition. So every person who's a stakeholder, who's a stakeholder in that will have a chance to vote, will have a chance to indicate their preference. As far as the Q&A, we will do everything in our power tonight to answer as many questions as we can, as well as the 2 upcoming town hall sessions. We will be at those meetings and we will answer as many questions as we can. If we can't answer your question, or if we don't answer it in a way that is digestible, we will follow up with you accordingly. But it is our goal to both take feedback. So you might have just a comment, and if you do, we'll certainly record the comment. And if you have a question, of course, we'll do our best to answer those questions tonight, as well as at those 2 sessions prior to coming back on the 29th and in advance of that decision.
Okay, and can I just suggest that the questions that are asked and that aren't answered formally, can there be like a written response by the Board of Ed that's posted so that we can see it publicly and view it?
Yes, we can do that. They'll be in the minutes, and if there's something that we can't answer, we'll do our best to update those minutes accordingly to reflect the answers to those questions.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Renee,
Hey.
Renee, thanks for sticking with us and coming back to us with so we could hear you. Pamela Stanley. Pamela, good evening. How are you tonight?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. So I am a parent of a soon-to-be kindergartner. So I want to thank you for finally implementing full-day kindergarten. I have a daughter who will be going into 4th grade next year. We live in the Murray Hill section of Berkeley Heights, so she may or may not be affected next year. But I think that overall, we have to look at all of the children, right? My son did not get to go to pre-K this year. His school did not open, and he has been home with me. Full day kindergarten for him will be a blessing, something he really needs. And he's had to go through a big transition as well. He was in school for the 3-year-old program, and now he's home. So I want to thank you for making this happen. I want to thank you for thinking about the pandemic and trying to help students the best you can. It's been a tough year from everyone's perspective. And I just want everyone to remember that there are lots of students who will be affected in one way or another, but we're all Berkeley Heights residents. And we really need to think about all the students and all the students' needs. So I just want to thank you for your time.
Great, Pamela. Thank you very much for your comments. Next up is Ayana Josephs. Ayana, good evening. How are you tonight?
I'm doing well. I'm not going to give you video because it's been a long week.
That's okay. That's okay.
But I had 2 things I wanted to say. I just wanted to ask, with all these different things going on, were the teachers involved in any of this discussion and planning and stuff like that? I mean, at the end of the day, the teachers are going to be the ones that have to, deal with the students and stuff like that. So I just wanted to know if they had some type of say. And then my second question is not even a question, it's more of a statement. I just wanted to say, like, no matter what happens, the kids will all see each other in middle school, no matter what school they went to. So I just want to keep that in mind. I know a lot of people are emotional about this, and I understand that. Trust me, I have 4 kids of my own. But I just want to keep in mind the bigger picture is that all these children will be together in middle school. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say, but I more so was concerned whether or not the teachers were involved.
Great. Ayana, thanks for your comment. Dr. Wall, you want to talk about the teacher involvement?
So a couple of weeks ago, we met, I personally met with the teachers, pre-K to 5, and we went through one of the iterations of the presentation and looked at all the scenarios, basically the same thing you saw tonight with we've made plenty of changes since then, but gave them we had a real discussion about what's coming, how it's going to impact them. And then we sent out a survey after that for them to give us feedback, as well as talk. We know there's going to be transitions. We can't do a K-2, 3 to 5 without moving teachers around, moving staff around. And so we gave them options to choose if they would prefer their building, their grade, or if they wanted to move buildings or move grades. So we have received feedback from the teaching staff.
Great. Dr. Rowley, thank you for that. Heidi Warner-Richardson, if you could just hold on 1 second, I'm going to come to you in a second. We do have a resident who's here with us at Columbia tonight who wants to speak. So actually, Todd, I'll come back to you in a second. So Heidi Warner-Richardson, I'm going to come to you actually right now. Let's see. It looks like you're unmuted. Heidi, good evening. How are you tonight?
Hi, good. Thank you. I just had one question. I don't have a long list of my credentials. I'm just a parent, but I think that's a big credential.
We agree with you wholeheartedly.
What I wanted to know is the survey that you're sending I assume it's just for scenario 4 and 5. And how are those results, once they're tallied, how are they used from there? What happens with them, and where do they come into play as far as the end result and the end vote? At what point do they come into play, and how?
So once we receive the survey results, and it will be a short window because I need the results before I can give the recommendation. There is, I will take the larger majority, and I know Doug's going to speak to the percentage on that, but I will work on taking the recommendation and the community feedback before I make my recommendation to the board.
So let me just add to that a little bit.
Yeah.
So Heidi, you're right. The survey will have scenario 4 and scenario 5. Right now, the survey will open on April 15th and will stay open until April 25th. That will cover both of the town hall sessions. It'll be released right after the first town hall. There'll be a 10-day window from April 15th to April 25th for the stakeholders to indicate their preference in that. The way we're thinking about it right now is, and the survey will be for the stakeholders of those students who are impacted by the change.
Yeah.
If there is greater than 55% of the community that votes for one of the scenarios, the community will have spoken loudly and clearly and indicated that they are in favor of that. If the number is between 50 and 54% or so, then that will be that within a margin of error, and that will indicate that the community is relatively equally divided by that. And the superintendent has indicated that as long as that the community has spoken, she will abide by that and recommend the scenario that the community has spoken clearly about. So that's how we'll do it. That recommendation will be on the agenda for the April 29th meeting. There'll be discussion by the board, and then we will move forward. But thanks for your question.
Okay, thank you. I just, to add to that, I've heard the word stakeholders. What exactly does that mean when you say stakeholders?
So what I mean is stakeholders, the people, the families who currently have a pre-K through 4th grade student.
Gotcha.
Those are
Okay.
those are the families who the survey will go to, because those are, when I say stakeholders, those are the people who are impacted by the changes we've been talking about this evening.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you so much.
Great, Heidi, thanks for joining tonight. Okay, we'll keep going. Michael LeBlond, I see you next. Michael, good evening. How are you tonight?
Good evening. I appreciate the time this evening. A couple comments before I go into my rest of it. I really can't support any of these plans that will move my oldest son out of Woodruff to another school again. If either of those plans are not selected, he'll be put in 5 schools in a span of 7 years. He'll have done kindergarten at a Catholic school, 1st grade at Mary Kay, 2 through 4 at Woodruff, and a year and a half of that Woodruff has been remote. He'll go to then Hughes and then yet another school. That kind of transitional change is way too much for one child to deal with. So I can't support moving him early out of Woodruff in any manner. I'd like to I've got some questions to the end, but a couple more comments. I appreciate the concept of common planning. I'm a veteran teacher. Common planning time sounds fantastic, but it's not practical. Teachers teach with different styles, different methods, different models of ideas. So common planning may sound great, and it sounds great to parents. Oh, my kid will get the same class and the same things. That never works out that way. I'm a common planning teacher with another 10th grade teacher this year myself, and we tried it for about 2 weeks, and our styles are so different, we abandoned it to pursue the curriculum with our own preferences and specializations. The biggest concern I have here is there is no discussion about the impact this is going to have on the teachers and administrators. There's no discussion there. And I'm going to go and read part of my letter that I sent to the entire board earlier this week to really go into the details of that. And then I'll share the questions that I sent to the entire board on Monday as well. My greatest concerns about redistricting are the impact it will have on students, families, teachers, and administrators. Forcing dramatic change upon students who have already suffered from a year plus of chaos and turmoil is questionable. I've seen how students react to changing schools unexpectedly in my 17 years of experience as a teacher. Some will transition with no problems, others will struggle, and some will suffer greatly. Discipline issues, emotional and behavioral issues will impact learning of the students who are moved and the students who weren't moved. The district could see bullying arise as new students are treated differently by their peers in new schools. Families will have to adjust to new teachers, administrators, and staff, which will cause further stress on children, staff, and families. Shuffling teachers and staff around to different buildings is likely to cause a similar problem. The teachers of our district have worked tirelessly for more than a year of this pandemic. More changes will further tax and stress the staff forced to change buildings, which will impact teaching performance, attendance, stress, and student learning. When I was forced to change schools years ago, my teaching and performance suffered. My wife experienced similar stress and anxiety when she was forced to change schools in her district. All of these issues combined make it impossible for my family to support any redistricting that moves students, families, and teachers against their will. I don't believe it's in the best interest of anyone to make these changes in 2021. I'm going to share the list of questions I sent to the entire board and district. I will be fair, you did address some of them partially, but some of them were not addressed in any way. So I'm just going to share my list. This is the 10 I sent the entire board in that order. How were the boundaries for redistricting determined? What demographic statistics were used to redraw school districts? What public input was used in redistricting? Dates of meetings, minutes, and attendance records from January through now? How are the members of the Board of Education and their families, children, grandchildren, nieces, and nephews impacted by rezoning? Are they impacted at all? Why has the district delayed the Oprah process for the documents related to this process? Will the BoE publish all the documents related to this process to the public on the BoE website? When will they be available for public review? How will the redistricting impact budgets and district expenses, notably on student transportation, moving materials, and teaching materials between buildings? What will this all the facilities? District deal with students' concerns when the plan is announced? Are all the schools, staff, students, and teachers equally impacted by these changes? Was the town council and mayor included in redistricting, and are they impacted by the rezoning? And number 10, will the BoE actually take the feedback from the community seriously when making final decisions on this plan?
Michael, thank you very much for your comments, and a double thank you for sending us your questions in advance. Dr. Varley and I will answer all 10 of your questions for you this evening as we've had a chance to talk about them. Dr. Varley, why don't you take your questions and then I'll do mine. All right, I'll feed them to you. The first one was, how are the boundaries for redistricting determined?
So we used the recycling map and then worked on our guiding principles, which were, could students walk to school and how could we minimize change impact? We did not take into account any kind of race issue or anything along those lines. That was not something we considered in that process.
What was the public input was used for in redistricting?
Our public input is coming up in the April 14th and April 22nd in those meetings, as well as our community survey that we'll be sending out.
Will the Board of Ed publish all the documents related to this process to the BoE website for public review?
We will post the presentation and some of the questions that have been asked tonight that we did not have answers to. We will post the answers. We have a great deal of working papers which have people's addresses and information on, so that we could try to delineate students that needed to be moved. So we would not share that. Those are working papers. They will not be shared.
How will the redistricting plan impact budgets and district expenses, transportation, moving materials, teacher materials?
We definitely saw on the presentation, we are saving money in whichever scenario 4 or scenario 5 we went with. As far as moving materials, I know Ms. Felzola and I have discussed ordering boxes and tape, and the cost of that would be minimal. And our own maintenance crew would move the boxes and the teachers over to their new buildings and new classrooms.
Great, thanks. And Michael, I think you asked also about the bathrooms. The overall capital cost to upgrade the bathrooms at Mary Kay and Woodruff is approximately $500,000. To your other questions, how are members of the Board of Ed and their families, children, grandchildren impacted by the redistricting or the impact at all. There are a couple of board members who have children in the district, and at least one that I know of who has grandchildren in the district. That was not a consideration at all. We obviously split the town by the recycling map, and we made 2 changes based on doing that. But I can get back to you very specifically with that. I'll drop you a note about that when I get the answers from each of the board members. Why has the district delayed the Oprah process for the document related to the process? The district is not by any means delaying it on purpose at all. A number of people have submitted Oprah requests. Some of them have been quite large in their Oprah requests in terms of the number of documents they're looking for. Some people also have overly broad Oprah requests. In fact, they're all listed in our meeting minutes, and we are working through those as quickly and as expeditiously as possible. I do realize that some people want it a little sooner than we are responding. When will the plan be finalized and announced to the community? Obviously, the plan was shared with the community tonight. It will be finalized at our April 29th meeting. How will the district deal with students' concerns when the plan is announced? Well, I assume that students will be hearing the plan potentially from their families now, and we'll deal with it the way we always do. Hopefully, it will be dealt with a combination at school if it comes up. Also, I assume parents will be sharing potential impacts with their students. Are all school staff, student, teachers equally impacted by these changes? No, they're not. If you have a chance to go through the student flows, you'll see that there are different impacts to different grades at different schools. And in my opening remarks, I shared that less than 20% of the students are impacted. In terms of the teachers, Dr. Varley shared that teachers will be indicating their preference based on building or school. And once we know those, of course, we'll have a better sense of that. Was the town council and mayor included in redistricting, and they're impacted by the rezoning? There is no rezoning. We're not moving anybody in or out. So there's no rezoning. Every student who lives in Berkeley Heights will still be attending school in Berkeley Heights. The mayor and the town council were not part of this process, as there's no impact to them or no input required. Will the Board of Ed actually take the feedback from the community seriously when making the final decision? I couldn't be more emphatic about that. We are, as I shared previously, giving the community the chance to indicate their preferred scenario via the vote. Michael, as always, thank you very much for your comments and your questions. Matt Seide, I apologize, Matt, if I didn't get your last name right. Matt, good evening.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Good. So in the presentation tonight, they showed about 5 options, but at the end, it looks like the only 2 that are really up for discussion are options 4 and 5, which, while it seems like is, you're asking the community for their opinion and to vote on something, it is essentially the same option, albeit one is delayed by 1 year. So is there a reason why we are only giving the option, which is really one option, and not giving the community the option to vote on any of the other prior options? Because again, like I said, you're giving us the ability to vote, but it really is just the same option, it sounds like this is what the board wants to do. Second of all, second question is for option 3. Option 3 seems at least equal, if not more favorable, in terms of an allocation of equity from a student perspective across the different schools. But it sounds like that option was not proceeded with because of the quote unquote best practices of having the K through 2 and 3 through 5. So what is the board's idea in terms of why option 3 was not more considered, and if the option 4 and 5 is the way to go, would you consider that the board is putting a premium on the best practices of having these specialists allowed to go into these schools versus having the equity amongst the different schools?
Thanks for your question. So you are correct. The superintendent recommended a K-2 and 3-5 structure, and there is 2 different scenarios, whether that be a 1-year transition or a 2-year transition. So you're exactly correct. You're exactly correct. That is what the survey will be on it. As to why we didn't include all of the options, the superintendent, as well as some of the others who spoke tonight, talked about developmentally appropriate schools and fixing some of the equity, and having a 1st through 5th grade school structure really does not provide that. And that's what our experts are telling us. That's what the research is. And although that was a scenario that was considered, it is not part of the recommendation. And the recommendation is the K-2, 3 to 5 structure, with, again, a question about doing that in 1 year versus 2 years. So that's why scenario 3 was looked at, but it was not part of the recommendation. Again, our goal tonight was to share all the scenarios, but also narrow it down to the recommendations that the superintendent provided to the board, and that the community will vote on.
Okay.
Matt,
So is it fair to say that the board and the superintendent have kind of narrowed down what they want to do, and now we're being asked to make a decision on something that is the lesser of two evils of what the board is looking to do anyway?
I would agree with what you said, except for the lesser of two evils. So I would agree with you that, yes, the recommendation of the superintendent and the board is around.
Okay, so there's no option to vote on any other options except for what the board is proposing right now.
That's correct.
Great, thank you.
Great. Matt, thank you very much. Stephanie Z. Stephanie, good evening.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for sharing the much anticipated plans. And I think, Doug, you commented earlier about the teacher impact. And what I would like to know in either of scenario 4 or 5, if the current principal at Woodruff will be displaced as a result of the school changing from 2 to 5 to a K-2 school. I'm interested to know, given Woodruff will be most impacted by this change, with the school going to a more of a kind of like a younger children's school rather than a kind of like the higher grades in the elementary. And for the rising 5th graders who choose to stay in Woodruff, I think they would probably want to graduate the school with the same principal whom they are familiar with and love. And so I just want to know if these changes will mean leadership changes as well, because I don't know, I don't work in education. I don't know if you need different qualifications for these, these kindergarten or younger children grades.
So Stephanie, just administrative question before I answer your question. What's your last name so we can record it?
Zia.
Zia, great, thank you very much. Regarding the question about displacement of the Woodruff principal, it's not appropriate for us right now to talk about any individual, any principal, or any teacher movements. There are going to be some teacher and administrative impacts. We actually outlined that on our next step slide. When we know those, when we know this recommended solution, when we know those, we will actively, proactively, and at our earliest opportunity, communicate those changes to the community. Right now, we don't know what the community will recommend as part of that solution, either scenario 4 or scenario 5, and depending on what scenario the community indicates is their preference, that will have an impact on our teacher and administrative changes. So when we have that, we'll be happy to share that as quickly and as expeditiously as possible. Stephanie, thanks for your question this evening. Okay, you're ready. Todd's ready. Not yet. Todd, did you raise your hand on the Zoom? If you raise your hand, I can unmute you.
Can you unmute me now? Is that good? Okay, great. Thank you.
Todd.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. So first of all, thank you for allowing me to be here this evening. Very unique to be here in person rather than on Zoom. So thank you very much to all of you. So I appreciate what the gentleman just spoke about. And to clarify again, that we're really only voting on scenario 4 and 5. So the decision is made, the minds have been made up. And when you say you're going to actually take community feedback, frankly, you're not, because you're asking for us to either, do you want to delay a year or do you want to do this now? That's what it really boils down to. So unfortunately, that's very troubling, because when you say and you talk about having these opening listing sessions, and now literally all we're doing is basically debating on whether we want it now or later, it's not really community feedback at its finest, in my opinion. With that being said, I have a few questions that I wrote out and I'd like to ask them quick. And I actually decided to identify specific individuals on the board to answer the questions. So I'll go ahead and read them all, and I have a statement at the end, and then I can come back to the questions if you'd like. So first of all, Mr. D'Aquila, if you can, as Vice President, I'd like to understand a little bit more. Additionally, the superintendent tonight mentioned the plan has been formed over the last 4 months, but there's no community involvement in that period. Can you explain or help us understand why not, and why this was essentially kept from us? Being announced in February doesn't really necessarily cover the 4 months that have just transpired. So why would there have not been community involvement throughout that period to understand what was happening? And we're now being given this information with 3 weeks to go. Number two, Mr. Chinchilli, excuse me if I pronounced that wrong. The Board of Ed started discussing a plan to roll out full-day kindergarten in 2021. Why did no one feel it was necessary to share the public? I'd like your opinion of that. It seems, based on what has been discussed tonight, scenario 5 has been somewhat founded in the last few weeks based on recent concerns raised. And I say that with strong conviction because some of the comments made regarding feedback received why we moved to offer scenario 5 sure does speak to what is being said around the community now. And if that's the fact, that's great. But again, it doesn't seem like it's really much of a choice. Mrs. Young, question to you, and I am trying to go fast. Why did you neglect to reach out to parents or community members when coming up with your plan to announce full-day kindergarten following the February announcement? Did you not think there'd be a reaction from the community, from parents, when redistricting came up? The Board of Ed and superintendent have access to every parent. You could have used PTO and others as a sounding board. However, you clearly chosen to keep the community in the dark until now, with only 21 days. And you're saying we're having listening sessions and we're saying we're having town halls, but yet you're really not giving us a choice. So do you honestly think cramming this meeting in 2 listening sessions is proper communication? Is it really going to create awareness, desire, knowledge necessary to affect positive change? Next question, number 4, to Mrs. Penna. Can you please understand the direct understanding in detail on what portion of the $1 million capital expense is being allocated to the full day kindergarten project, as was listed in the previous board meeting and last meeting? I did ask this question at the last meeting and I was not given an answer. I would like to understand how the funds are being used for the project and what is not being done as a result. These funds are coming from capital reserve. So where were they before and how are they ending up there now? And also, can you explain why in October of 2020, there was a referendum that was required and now all of a sudden there's a shift and we're able to use these capital reserve funds? So it seems like something has been either eliminated or not done as a result to be able to utilize these funds. So I'm hoping, Ms. Penna, you can answer that. And then additionally, for the remaining members, Mrs. Riley, Mrs. Kirsch, if you can both respond, please. How do you respond to the 400+ members in the community who all signed a petition asking for this effort to be paused and that more transparency and dialogue occur? Are you aware of the Cranford Town example that has been brought to the attention of the community? They used a 7-month process, had significant dialogue to discuss, engage, and debate a major decision like this. I don't think that's unreasonable. So do these 400 members of our community matter? And if so, will you take their positions seriously and what will you do about it? Mrs. Varley, I have a question for you. You mentioned tonight about developmentally appropriate structure, but I would like to ask you, out of New Providence, Summit, Westfield, Milburn, and Chatham, none of which have that, why it is so important that Berkeley Heights now must have it, when these are our surrounding communities and towns that are very competitive, in fact, not more highly rated than Berkeley Heights schools. They don't have a developmentally appropriate structure, so why do we, and why are you pushing this? Lastly, I'm a parent who recently moved here to this town. My wife and I moved here for the education for our children. We chose the house we bought based on the reputation of Woodruff and the principal. We did our research and we knew where we wanted to be. Others have done the same all across town. I'm sharing this because you're about to make a decision that has a great impact far beyond busing kids. People have planned to make major life decisions, home purchases with exorbitant taxes based on schools, not just a district. It's important to understand this. Please don't ignore this when considering the option to redistrict. It's a bad idea. Personally, when I collected signatures, walking door to door, yes, I did do that. Each person who I spoke to who signed that petition said, how on earth can they think to do this to kids at a time like this following a pandemic? Just think about that for a second, please. That's many individuals said that. I've had many people share with me multiple options, none of which were even presented here tonight, that might just work outside of what you are trying to forge ahead with, which will keep kids in schools that are currently in, allow full-day kindergarten without redistricting. Please pause this effort now, do the right thing, and attempt what they did in Cranford, or even go back to the presentation that was extended in 2014 here in this town with the previous superintendent. There was almost 7 to 8 months of engagement listed in the timeline. The timeline actually that was posted recently on the district's Facebook website. It's actually pictured here on the slideshow tonight. That presentation that is posted, that is available, was over 8 months of engagement with the community. In that engagement, it actually said that there would be a coalition. Sorry, it's actually slide 45 in that deck. Create a feasibility committee inclusive of board members, administrators, teachers, and parents. This obviously hasn't been done. Why not? Again, that was our own district in 2014. So out of all of this, I think that it's important that we realize this is being rushed. This is ridiculous to think that 3 weeks, 21 days exactly, that a decision will be made when you're just now tonight making the community aware. Seriously think about that. You're asking everyone to digest major changes with 21 days. So I'd also like to leave you a quote from an author who I feel as a book is so on spot for what we're going through in our town. Adam Grant, an organizational psychologist at Wharton. Think again, the power of knowing what you don't know. That's the name of the book. His quote, we learn more from people who challenge our thought process than those who affirm our conclusions. Strong leaders engage their critics and make themselves stronger. Weak leaders silence their critics and make themselves weaker. This reaction isn't limited to people in power. Although we might be on board with the principle, in practice, we often miss out on the value of a challenge network. So please think about that. There are more ideas and options to be considered. Please consider them and be wise. Don't rush to thinking you know what's best. Be the community leaders you are all elected to be. Do the right thing. Now is not the time to make this change. Please do not redistrict our children. And I recommend all of you get a copy of this book. It's a fast read, and it might be very applicable to what we're all going through right now. Thank you for your time.
Great, Todd. Thanks for your question. Let's do this. Let's take them. I'll ask each of the board members to respond in order to that. Given how many, could everybody in the room go on mute?
Oh, sorry. Yes, certainly.
Sorry. Thanks. So for each of the board members, I'll do it in the order that Todd asked the question. I'll ask you to keep your comments brief since there are 7 or so questions to answer. I'll start with you, Mike. Question about community involvement. Mike?
Right, Todd, can you repeat that question again? I'm sorry, it's a little bit late, so.
Okay, can you hear me? Great. So what I wanted to understand was the plan has, it was mentioned by the superintendent this evening that the plan has been formed for the last 4 months with no community involvement. How can this be? And why do you feel that the community is now only being given 21 days to know?
I've been involved with, besides just being on the school board, many boards, being in higher education, everything. We're putting a plan together to develop and to present. Administration, the superintendent put the plan together to come up with the best scenario to present to the public. This is how I do a lot of business like this myself, so I'm not understanding why you're saying that we were keeping it to ourselves. We're coming up with the best plan to recommend forward to the community to review.
Robert, you want to answer the second question about full day kindergarten and why it
can
was
you-
or wasn't shared with the public?
Can you please repeat your question?
Sorry, Todd.
Okay. I did say when the Board of Ed started discussing plans to roll out full day kindergarten in 2021, why did no one feel it was necessary to share the input? Based on what has been discussed tonight, scenario 5 has been found in the last few weeks on concerns raised because of comments made tonight that literally it seems those addressers are being addressed with the attempt of scenario 5. So can you answer why it was necessary to not share this in the beginning of 2021 until now?
Great, thanks, Robert.
Well, I don't know that I'd say whether it's necessary or not necessary. I think it was a judgment call, and that would really generally come from the administration and the board president. I don't know that I had a feeling because I don't know really how long the redistricting part has been around. Regarding kindergarten, I really think that we were trying to do the right thing. As Doug mentioned a moment ago, trying to make sure that people didn't waste their money on putting down deposits for full day kindergarten that were non-refundable. That's why it was February, and it came kind of quick and all of a sudden, especially when you look at the slide comparing it to October. So I think that that's very fair, but I think our hearts were in the right place. We don't want people to lose money. I like your second part of your question about the fourth and the fifth scenarios. I don't know how the fifth scenario came to be, or I think the question is why. You're placing it on social media. I can't refute that.
All right, great, thanks, Robert. We'll help you out. Todd, why don't you repeat your question to Joy? It'll just make it easier because now I see the pattern here.
Okay, I think.
I know it was
Joy,
regarding
so-
neglecting to reach out to the community, right? Go ahead. I'll let you say your question. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So why did you neglect to reach out to parents or community members when coming up with a plan to announce full day kindergarten following a February announcement? And it does seem interesting that there's, between full day kindergarten and redistricting, because it sure seems that maybe one would be possible without the other. Did you not think there would be a reaction from the community, from parents, when redistricting came up? The board had many opportunities and every avenue to reach out to parents or PTO as a sounding board. However, it's clear that you're choosing to keep the community in the dark until now. And then again, do you think cramming 2 listening sessions is proper communication that's going to create the awareness, desire, and knowledge necessary to affect positive change?
That's a long one. Okay. So I believe that we wanted to have the plan from Dr. Varley, like a plan that could be presented to the community that was vetted. I do think that during the listening sessions, that although options 4 and 5 are at the top of the list, that all of the options, if families want to discuss them, should be discussed. There's still an opportunity for feedback. That's why it was put in the presentation. I think there's passion behind those scenarios based on what Dr. Varley had mentioned and, the expertise that they have there. So I do think that there's still opportunity for conversation. I mean, and I would want to hear, other feedback from individuals. I also feel like, we set the schedule, and if I felt that there was more feedback to come, or that we weren't receiving what we needed to, I would say maybe we need to see if we need to talk more. So, I mean, that's the plan. is to have those 2 sessions and then the vote. But if I felt uncomfortable with it, I would raise it and say, okay, maybe we should talk more about it.
Thank you very much for your openness. I would encourage you to all rethink and possibly just giving the public 2 options so that to actually give real suggestions that maybe those are actually.
I cannot hear what he's saying.
Oh, she can't hear you.
Hopefully, I think I'm there
There you
now.
go. Now you're
Sorry, I
there.
keep
Sorry.
having
All
to
right.
keep going on and off. So I was just saying, thank you very much for your real and honest answer. I think that it's great that you're willing to hear the feedback. I would like to ask, is it possible then that we actually open this up to real dialogue and have an opportunity where additional suggestions are actually presented, considered, and voted on, rather than voting on 2 scenarios, which are basically the same minus a year delay? Because if you really do want to take public feedback, then I think the opportunity to solicit new ideas and put them out there as a possible option, that's real engagement at that point. So thank you for your honest answer in that regard.
Hey, Todd, I'm going to mute you for a second. If you don't mind, did you have a specific reason for asking the individuals a question? You asked the next question you asked to someone who I can think of a better board member who's qualified to answer your question. So if you'll give me a little leeway, I would prefer to have Chris Riley answer your question about the capital costs, because she's the chair of our finance committee. And I think she could provide a better answer to your question. If you're okay with me just juggling around the questions, you're good with that? Okay. So Todd, I'm going to take you off of mute. If you could repeat your question for Chris, and I'll let Chris answer the question as she's our finance person.
Okay, so Chris, the question was, can you explain your direct understanding in detail of what portion of the $1 million capital expense that is being allocated to the full-day kindergarten project was listed in the previous board budget meeting presentation? How is this being used for this project, and what is not being done as a result? Where are the funds coming from in the reserve? Can you also explain why in October a referendum was needed and now it's not? A shift of position with no communication from October 1. Would really like to try and understand that better.
Well, I don't know why you think a shift in position from carving this out of a referendum is a big deal. I really don't understand your question, but
respectfully,
no,
let me
answer. Okay.
So therefore, that is a big deal, and that's a shift.
I don't think it is. Okay, because
you don't think it's a big deal. That's a shame.
I don't think that your specific question about pulling full day, the money allocated to full day kindergarten out of the referendum, I think it's actually a very good thing for the community that we don't have to go to a referendum to do full day kindergarten, because we have, we've kicked this can down the road for a really long time. And we have been, focused on trying to build a capital reserve over the years. Now, that is not easy, because the vast majority of our budget every year, our operating budget, is for salaries and benefits and things like, books and textbooks and technology. But every year we manage to put some money away for an emergency. Every 15 or 20 years, we have to go out for a referendum for, significant infrastructure needs, because we have 6 buildings and we have roofs and boilers and security and all sorts of things that are big ticket items that we cannot fund out of our annual operating budget. But, to save for a rainy day, we do over time try to build a capital reserve. And when I went to the board early this year, and I said, we've had a substantial increase in state aid, getting us back to the levels we were at in 2010, when it was almost cut by 50%. And over the years, that state aid has been increasing along with extraordinary aid. Our transportation savings definitely helped us. We had a number of retirements where we're able to replace teachers with, lower cost teachers. And all of those things combined allowed us to, really consider doing full day kindergarten without having to go to referendum to the community. And when you think about it, one of the questions you asked me was one, how on earth would we want to do this? Well, our kids have just, gone through a year or maybe more where, they've potentially fallen behind. And our job here on the board is to be unbiased. And with all due respect, I think you're quite biased. And we're considering all the students in this district. That's our responsibility. And I unfortunately, I'm very sensitive to the people who are caught in the crosshairs, as Doug mentioned before. But I think whatever we do here, we're going to make somebody unhappy. And I think my colleagues on this board and I have listened very carefully to the experts. Those guiding principles were extremely important to us in terms of minimizing change. And we were able to find the money to be able to get this, get full day kindergarten done, being sensitive to the fact that it's coming on the heels of a very difficult year. And that's what we want to hear from the parents. Now, I agree with Joy. I don't think that, these listening sessions, if parents want to express other potential, ideas, I'm all ears. But like I said, we've kicked this can down the road for a really long time. This is way overdue. We found the money to do it, which I think is a really good thing. It's not going to cost $1 million. It's basically $500,000 in capital expense. And then we have, we have to hire 3 additional teachers. And so I just think it's a really good thing for the community. And I hope that answers your question.
Chris.
Yeah, if I could just respond to one moment to her comment. I'll be very brief. First of all, concerned parent, I don't think is necessarily biased. And second of all, you basically just said that the reserve fund is a rainy day fund, and you're now allocating rainy day funds to a new initiative. So just let that be stated.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you something else, Todd. Like a few years ago, we had built up a reserve over several years. And then we needed to make some significant improvements at the high school. And we didn't want to go out for a referendum for that. It was the track and the field, and Doug helped me out. There were some other things. And we pretty much, depleted the capital reserve to make these changes, which we really felt we couldn't put off. And then we started rebuilding the capital reserve. And we have sufficient money to be able to do the construction for the bathrooms, because we've been thinking about this for several years. This is not something that just kind of, fell out of the sky. And look, I don't mean to be disrespectful in terms of saying you're a concerned parent. I know you're concerned, and I'm very sensitive to that, but I'm just saying that our job on the board is to be unbiased and to find a solution that it's in the best interest for all the students in our district, all the students in Berkeley Heights. And if you bought a house because you wanted to go to Woodruff School, I have to tell you, as chair of the budget committee, I know why you wanted to do that, because every year I struggle when I look at, the budget for Woodruff when there's 16, 17, 18 kids in a class. And then I look at the budget for Hughes when there's 23, 24 kids in a class, and I really struggle with that.
All right, Chris, thank you. I know, Todd, there's 2 more questions that you have, and then I want to move on. This has been a long 7-part question. Helen, Todd, can you repeat your question to Helen?
Sure, absolutely. Helen, how do you respond to the 400 parents and the community members who all signed a petition asking for this effort to be paused and more transparency and dialogue occur? Are you aware of the Crownford Town example that has been brought to attention by the community? They used a 7 months process, had significant dialogue, and discussed and engaged and debated a major decision like this. Do these 400 members of our community matter? And if so, how will you take their position seriously, and what will you do about it?
I think we have to take everybody in the community seriously. it is not a closed book. And as we said, you know, to one of the questions previously, there has been no final vote on this. I do understand the passion of everybody involved. I did go through this process when they closed Hamilton Terrace when my 3 children were in that school. So I understand, and my ears are open, and we will listen and discuss.
Thank you.
Great. And the last question was for Dr. Varley. Why don't you repeat the question for Dr. Varley as well?
Yes, you referred this evening to developmentally appropriate structure, but from the surrounding communities, New Providence, Summit, Westfield, Milburn, and Chatham do not have it. So where do you feel that those communities differ from us, and why are you putting this recommendation in? Because some of those schools are actually rated much higher than ours here in Berkeley Heights. So how can you say that
Chatham does
it's
have a
deserved?
similar structure. Chatham is K-3, and then it's 4 to 5 school, 6 to 8, and 9 to 12. So they definitely do. My children go to Chatham schools, so I do know their structure very well. One thing that we did talk about is that we have the ability to do this. Not every district has this ability. We have the ability to do best practices, make developmentally appropriate education. Not other schools have it. I know Chatham is adding kindergarten to one of their buildings, just putting all the kindergarten kids in one building and not redistricting, because redistricting does cause emotion. And we understand that. But if we want to be developmentally appropriate, if we want to have best practices, and we need to fix the equity issue, and once I know there's an equity issue, we need to fix it, then this is the best way to go about it.
Okay. Dr. Varley, thank you very much for that. And Todd, thanks for your question. I'm just going to do a little bit of an administrative piece. It's now approaching 10:20 in the evening. We have been at this for close to 3 hours. I see 9 more people who have their hands raised. I'm going to propose that the 9 people, and I'll read out their names in a second, who have registered their hand, those will be the last 9 that we're going to take this evening. I've set a goal of not staying here past 11 o'clock. We have administrators and teachers who are on, who have work to do tomorrow. So do board members, and so do many parents from the public. We also have 2 more open sessions, town hall sessions. So Doug Grober, Lisa Porras, Lee Timmerman, Jay Montoya, Frank Pisani, Yelena, Toya Facey, John Miguez, and Tom Forager. Those are the remaining people that we're going to, we'll have a chance to address the board tonight. We've had the session open now for close to 2 hours. I don't know how many total people we've had. We're going to end the citizens hearing after those 10 people speak. And then again, there is multiple other sessions to do that. So I am moving forward, and Doug Grober is here. Doug, good evening.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
I can hear you very well.
Okay. I'm a resident of Berkeley Heights. I have a daughter in Woodruff, 3rd grade, a daughter in GL at 9th grade. A lot of things have already been covered. I do have a couple of questions, and Mrs. Varley actually left, but I'm going to just continue. Carving kindergarten out of the referendum that was just commented on. You want to be fair, put all the options on the survey. You want to be fair, have a community vote. This is not about full day kindergarten. This is about redistricting, okay? The board was very, very transparent with COVID, very transparent and upfront about it. They were very informative about it. They were not informative about this. I know of nobody in my neighborhood who knew about the possibility of their kid being sent to a different school. That is why people are upset. I'm still sitting here and I'm upset. I get infuriated at some of the comments that I hear. You talked about studies that you've had from people. There have been other communities that have had studies. Cranford was mentioned. Everybody can see it. Cranford and Pittman both had K-2, 3 through 5 suggested by people that are doctorates and experts. They rejected those plans because there was too much backlash from the community. There was too much negative feedback from the community about it. You guys, your responsibility is to the will of this community. You mention it in your handbook. There's not enough input here, hands down. Your communication on this was horrible. It was a reaction to a petition, and that's the way it looks. And you have to own that. I'm sorry. Okay. My questions are actually this, and I'll be brief. Why is there not a community vote to this? I don't really call a survey a vote. Maybe it is, but this is a bigger issue. We have votes on stop signs. Okay. Why is the community only involved in a 2-week window? 3 meetings in 2 weeks. Cranford had 10 meetings in 3 months. I understand that situation included K through 12 and busing, and it was slightly different, but this is huge. This is huge. You guys want to permanently change the district. Like somebody said, there's emotions, there's all certain factors into this. So that's one question. Why did you wait to expose the plan to the community now? You did so well being transparent about COVID. Why didn't you start in January communicating to the community what you were planning on doing, what you were trying to develop? I think that's all I have.
Thank you, Doug, for your comments. On your first question about is the survey a community vote or not, I'm just going to mute you, Doug, for a second, just review the echo. As far as the community vote and is it a survey, we are allowing all the stakeholders in pre-K to 4 who have skin in this game to indicate their preferred scenario. Some people want to call it a vote. Some people want to call it a survey. I'm not sure there's the difference between that. So the parents are having direct input, and the community will speak as a group. I don't know what more we could do to have every single person share their input than doing that. In terms of your second question was, why are we doing it now? Why didn't we do it in January? I think I answered part of that question for you before in terms of when we changed our plan from moving full-day kindergarten forward 1 year to September of 21. We announced it in February when we figured out that we could afford to do it. At that time, we didn't have a plan to share with you. We didn't withhold a plan or not share a plan or hide a plan or anything like that. We didn't have a plan. We had a direction. We had a vision to introduce that, but it took us time to build that plan. And yes, there was a window from February until tonight that we didn't share the plan with you, not because we didn't want to, because it wasn't built. And yes, I do understand the frustration. Thank you for your compliments on what we did for the pandemic and that. And we do accept full responsibility for the fact that we didn't communicate this plan between February and now, because we didn't have one. Tonight, hopefully you saw the rigor and the comprehensiveness of our plan. And now there is things for people to react to. To your last question, it was more of a comment of, we now have a couple of meetings to talk about this. Yes, it is a more condensed plan. You and I have talked before about the differences between Cranford and Berkeley Heights. There are 3 nights to provide input. There is a parent vote, and that is how we are doing parent input. We think we're going to get a lot of it. If there are other ideas, there are plenty of meetings to do that and provide that input. So Doug, thanks for your comments this evening. Lisa Porras. Lisa, good evening.
Hi, good evening. Folks far more articulate than me have said a lot about their reactions to how this was rolled out, so I will not make a whole speech about that, but I did have a lot of concerns about that were already expressed by others. I have a 2nd grader and a 4th grader at Hughes, and I'm so glad to hear that 4th graders, rising 5th graders are being taken into account as part of this. what does that mean for their siblings? So if my soon-to-be fifth grader wanted to stay at Hughes, I'm also in the area you've designated as across from Columbia, although I'm not actually across from Columbia, but we are in that crosshairs, as you guys used that word earlier. So my kids would be split between two different schools, or are there any plans for siblings that might be in this kind of situation? Because I can't imagine we're the only ones like that. I also wanted to find out, I'm so glad that Ms. Riley and Ms. Young both expressed openness to hearing parental feedback on other potential plans other than Plan 4 and Plan 5. I wondered if it was ever considered a plan to roll this out over 3 years to minimize the impact on the younger students as well. So students could have completed their entirety at the same school and slowly integrated this or implemented this over a series of years. I understand we're all anxious to get full day kindergarten in. I was really disappointed when it didn't happen for my kids. I fully on board for getting it in as soon as we can, but obviously with as minimal impact as possible to others. And I had stepped away for a little bit, so maybe I missed it, but I just wanted to also express my disappointment that I didn't hear anything about the impact of this on students who have 504s and IEPs. I would have liked to have seen something about that as part of this presentation this evening, because obviously that can have significant impacts on students if they do have to change schools, potentially different therapists, different connections with their service providers in the school. So I would have liked to have heard something about that. And lastly, I know that you guys earlier talked about one of the guiding principles being maximizing students' ability to walk to school. As Ms. Penna may remember, I was on the Safe Routes to School committee for a while. I did not have the time I wanted to donate to give to that, so unfortunately had to resign, but that is an issue that I am very passionate about. This change would actually mean that I am geographically closer to Mountain Park than I am to Hughes, but I live in an area of Plainfield where we don't have a sidewalk. And it's not logistically safe for second graders, third graders to cross over Plainfield without having a sidewalk there, without being able to get to a crossing guard. So I wondered if there was any consideration in terms of how this would impact students that maybe now are closer, but still can't actually walk to schools, and how that might actually be addressed. Thank you.
Great, Lisa, thanks for your questions. I wrote down a couple of them. To your first question with your current second grader and fourth grader. So again, it depends a little bit on what scenario is voted for, but let me just address scenario 4, which would happen in the current year. So your fourth grader at Hughes would have the option to stay at Hughes instead of going to Mountain Park. That's an option that you have as a family. Given that you have a second grader, that second grader will go to Mountain Park. So you have an option. You could have one at Hughes and one at Mountain Park, or you could have both of them go to Mountain Park. And you're right, I think there are people like you who have kids 2 years apart. And we did provide that option, you know, and you obviously are in that group where you have 2 children who are impacted.
Right. So it would not be an option for the 2 kids to stay at Hughes for that 1 year.
Correct, that is not an option. We cannot offer that. We can only offer the transition option for the rising 5th grade students. We talked earlier tonight about how many different options and permutations and combinations we did. We looked at how many grade levels at each school could we let stay there. And the short answer is we could only do it for the rising 5th grade students. We could not offer it for other students. In terms of your 3-year plan, I don't believe we had a 3-year plan, but if someone wants to, you know, push that one forward.
We looked at a 3-year plan. We looked at a 4-year plan. We went through, when I say we looked at multiple options, we definitely did. However, our school capacity wouldn't hold any of the plans when we tried to transition it any longer than 2 years.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Varley. 504 and IEPs, I think Lisa said you might have missed part of it. We have had the special education, Michelle Gardner and her team looking at this, of course, and looking at the needs of special education students. Dr. Varley talked about this equity of programs and services, and child study teams is one of the things that we're trying to better balance. So the answer is yes, we have that. It didn't make a certain specific slide, but a couple of people have mentioned it tonight. So we will go back and we will begin to share a little bit more information. That's good feedback from the community tonight, because a couple of people have mentioned that, so we can make sure that we're sharing a little bit more information about that. In terms of the specifics of your situation regarding the crosswalk and the school, if you don't mind, let's take that offline. I'd probably ask you to reach out to Donna Felzola, our business administrator, tomorrow. I can't really speak to sidewalks. And
No, I understand that's a very specific question. I just was more generally wondering if there had been, when you were looking at the ability to increase the number of students being able to walk to school, if there had been any considerations of additional crossing guards as needed or whatever other accommodations might be needed. I know you're not gonna look at my house personally. I
That's
wasn't
okay.
expecting you to have the answer to that.
That's okay. We did look at transportation. We did look at the walking to schools. We did look at the walking paths because some of the schools have better walking paths than others. We have been in touch with the police department regarding overall crossing guards. Once we obviously have a final resolution and the timing, that will be one of our to-dos. And thank you. That's a good reminder for us that we do need to go back and make sure if we have to adjust the walking patterns from different neighborhoods to look at the crossing guards. Lisa, thanks for your question.
Thank you.
This evening. Lee Timmerman. Lee, good evening. Thanks for joining tonight.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, I have 3 points. I think there's one question in here. First of all, I think based on the conversations of multiple people, I think it would be beneficial to the board and the administration if they would expand the survey a little bit to include scenario 3 as an option. That seems to be balancing the staffing and the educational sizes in the schools with less impact on redistricting. I understand the issue about grouping grades together, K through 2 and 3 through 5. That seems to be the hinge on number 4. But if I was on the board, I'd be interested to see how the community feels about that and whether they would be more interested in scenario 3 if you want community input. So if you're doing a survey, I think it'd be worthwhile just to get the community's feel about that. That may eliminate some of the concern about neighborhood schools and everything else. It does impact the people up in Countryside or Murray Hill, as you call it. I've lived through closing Hamilton Terrace. I've lived through moving 6th graders to Columbia. I've lived through opening back up Mary Kay. So I've seen this happen many times, and there's been a lot more discussion than the few meetings we've had on this or will have on this when each of those happened before. So that's just a comment that I think it would be beneficial to the board to get more input on another scenario and just not scenario 4, AKA 5. My second comment, or is it more of a question? I didn't hear any discussion about the impact on busing under any of these scenarios, especially scenario 4. If we go to a K through 2 school, are we going to continue to bus 1st graders like we do to Mary Kay? Are we now going to bus 2nd graders to the 2 K through 2 schools? I didn't hear any discussion about if there's a change in the busing for younger kids. And I think that would be valuable for the community to know that. The third point I was going to make, you just answered the question, Doug, and Dr. Varley. I was going to suggest that maybe you give the 2 districts or the 2 sections of town that this is most impacting, the section behind the hardware store and the section next to Columbia, give those people in grades 3 through 5 right now the option of continuing in their current schools through that time period, not putting anybody new in there, but give them the option to continue in their current school if they want to. So those are my 3 points.
Lee, thank you very much for your questions, as always. Regarding the impact, so your first one's a comment. The second one, the impact on busing. So we have looked at the impact on busing, and we will bus all the children in this district per the guidelines, which is greater than 2 miles. So if you live greater than 2 miles from any of our K-2 or 3 to 5 schools, you will get busing. Obviously, people live, in and around one of the neighborhoods. So there is some busing. You mentioned obviously locations that are, far away from these elementary schools. You mentioned Countryside or Murray Hill. Obviously they get busing to some of these schools. In the old model, in the pre-COVID model, so pre-COVID, we used to offer courtesy busing to Mary Kay McMillan for kindergarten 1st graders. that will not be offered anymore. In the new K-2 and 3 to 5 structure, we will offer busing for all students that live greater than 2 miles. And to your last thing, what I think was a question was about the people who are in the impacted areas by the hardware store and opposite Columbia. We do not have the option to offer them to stay. We can offer it for the rising 5th graders. Again, we've run multiple scenarios, but we are not able to do that. Lee, as always, thanks for your questions. The next person I see is Jay Montoya.
Good evening. My name is Rina Leiva. Jay Montoya is my husband. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Just I want to start with an overall statement. I think many have said this already. This is not about full daycare and the decision that has been made by the Berkeley Heights community or by the BoE. Actually, I think as a BH resident, it's a welcome decision. This is more about redistricting and how this is going to affect our kids. I live in Berkeley Heights for about 7 years now. I have a 6th grader in CMS, and now I have an upcoming 3rd grader in Woodruff. These are decisions that will affect our kids. And of course, emotions should be validated and considered and not being labeled as biased because we are sensitive. There are 400 parents that have signed a petition that should be considered. Now you have talked about a survey being as a way for the community to voice their opinion. I don't think having a survey that's giving me an option to choose from option A plus and another option that is A plus, it's giving me an opportunity to voice my opinion. It's just forcing me to make a decision on 2 options that are very similar. Either my kid is going to go to one school, to another school earlier or later. I think, as mentioned by others, this should be expanded to other scenarios because otherwise there's no point to vote. It's going to be the same. And I have 2 questions. Where grades 3 and 5 are critical for kids, when these decisions were being made, was grade 3 considered in the decisions? And I would also like to see where is the data that grades 1 through 5 is not a proper conductive way for providing a learning benefit to kids. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks for your question. I'll take the first question. I'll let Dr. Varley answer the second one. Grade 3, what was considered, and obviously when we move from a structure that has 2 through 5 in 3 buildings to a structure that has K-2 and 3 to 5, 2 sets into different buildings, obviously all the grades are impacted. 3rd grade is impacted. So yes, we did look at multiple models and different ways to configure this, and all the grade levels were looked at. And the reality is some grades do have more impact than others. In some instances, again, depending on which scenario is selected, grade 3 has different impacts depending on the 1 year or 2 year. Dr. Varley, do you want to talk about, again, about the research about the K-2, 3 to 5?
So yes, and it's not that 1 to 5 is, I guess, inappropriate. It's just not a best practice. I reached out to multiple professors for early childhood and elementary education, and each one of them stated, if you had the ability to do a best practice and make a developmentally appropriate school building for all children, you would do it in the pre-K to 2, 3 to 5. Some of them did expand it pre-K to 3 and as an early childhood, but most of them talked about pre-K to 2, 3 to 5 being the best practice and being developmentally appropriate and allowing specialists in those buildings. Right now we have specialists 6 through 8 and 9 through 12. Our children deserve specialists in pre-K to 2 as well as 3 to 5.
Great, Dr. Varley, thank you. And thank you for asking a question. Next up
Yeah,
is,
I'm so sorry. And can you maybe my question about the survey grades, the scenario 4 and 5 are the only options. Can you consider to add another option like a scenario 3 or that was proposed earlier?
yes, we can certainly consider that. I mean, the board has right now do that, but the whole purpose of having these meetings is to take parent feedback. And I understand your feedback as well as others, people, including Lee Timmerman, who just spoke, want to include scenario 3 in there. So yes, I do hear your feedback. And we do register. Great,
Thank
thanks
you
for
so
your
much.
comment. Great. Frank Pisani, I see you next. Frank, good evening.
Good evening, how are you? So I'm going to come at this from a little different angle. What I heard tonight was that you announced this in February to forego parents putting deposits down at private programs. So I just want to understand, in scenario 5, kindergarten in 2021 would be our current situation with a half day. So all the parents that didn't put down those deposits on private programs or aftercare are sort of in a bind because most of those programs have have filled up already. So what do you say to those parents?
Sorry, Frank, was that your only question?
That was my only question.
Great, thanks for that. So in all of these, it's full day kindergarten. It's not half day kindergarten. So in all of these scenarios, we will be implementing a full day kindergarten for all students. So it'll be a full day, just like first, second, third, fourth, fifth grade.
In 2021 though, for
yes, in 2021, regardless of scenario 4 or scenario 5, it is full day kindergarten. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Frank. What happened to the? I'm going to pause for a second because there were other people who raised their hand whose hands are not raised. Okay, now they're back. Okay, next I see is John Miguez. John, good evening.
Good evening, everybody. How are you? Well, you don't have to answer.
That's okay. We're well, John. Thanks for joining.
I've been pretty vocal. I stand by everything I've said out there, and I know you've looked at it. I'm really angry. Dr. Varley, you brought up best practice. Best practice including family input and feedback. To say that this follows, to say that you are coming to a decision on best practice without a process that incorporates kids and families, and this isn't a process that incorporates kids and families. You're talking about a 3-week process. You guys are saying that you haven't had a plan since February, that you were kind of coming up with this as we landed on these 3 weeks, and that these 3 meetings are sort of a legitimate way of getting that. And yeah, I mean, it's emotion, and emotion is a balance of both logic and feeling. So just because something's emotional doesn't make it invalid. And I get that you surveyed professors in coming up or formulating a plan, but it would have been helpful if you talked to parents as well. These terms of kicking the can down the road, we're doing this too long. Those were terms that were used to pass other decisions. It's slogans, municipal building. That was a term that was used over and over again. And it was another decision that people felt kind of locked up, but a lot more transparent process, a lot more feedback for a building than for this decision. Bypassing referendums, So I guess I want to ask each and every board member to answer this individually. Do you agree that this process, 3 meetings or 2 meetings, is sufficient to get feedback from parents on a decision of this magnitude? I would like every single board member to respond to that individually.
Great, John. Thanks for your question. I'll do it around the word. So the question from John is, do you agree the 3 meetings is sufficient to get board member feedback? Again, I'll do it the way
parent feedback.
By getting parent feedback. Thank you for clarifying. I'll do it the way I see it on my screen. Joy,
I would say that this is a starting point, and if we saw that, in my opinion, if we saw that more meetings were needed, then we would add, but this was the starting point to get feedback.
Great, thanks, Joy. Robert? Hold on, Robert, you're on mute.
Okay, I agree with Joy. I don't think we're locked into 3 meetings, if you include this one and the 2 town halls. But also keep in mind, we have a survey as well. And we're getting other feedback in other ways. You should see our inboxes.
Great.
So
Hold on, let's
okay.
time. Keep going. Helen.
I agree with Joy and Robert. If we need more meetings, we need more meetings, and we will listen to the public as well as best we can.
Great, Helen, thanks. Chris?
Yeah, I think this is the feedback process and, we're listening.
That doesn't answer the question.
I think that the next 3 meetings will provide residents with a good opportunity to voice their concerns, and we'll take it from there.
Great, thanks, Chris. Mike,
Yeah, same sentiments as Chris, that the next 3 meetings will give us the inputs.
great, thank you. Jordan,
I think 3 meetings is ample, actually, considering, they're not 30-minute meetings. We're taking the time, we're listening to feedback. Sure, there's no one saying that there's not an opportunity to have further conversation, but I do think that 3 well thought out meetings planned out with plenty of advance notice and lots of circulation of information in advance is a great place to start. Yeah.
great, Jordan, thanks. Lastly, Angela.
Yeah, I agree with the sentiment of the members. It is a starting point. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussions. We're going to be listening. There's going to be communication. We're open to hearing what people have to say, interested in their feedback, and decisions will be made based on what the community has to say.
Great. So I have a follow-up question to that then. So how credible or how legitimate or how confident am I going to be in feedback that largely indicates that this process needs to pause, or that a plan that isn't on there needs to happen with a turnaround time for September? So you guys are saying 3 meetings are enough at this time frame. This is going to be shot in September, and I guess you're asking us to have confidence in a process that's going to land with significant feedback. If that's the overwhelming opinion that none of these options are viable, right? And this blows up that September timeline, how credible or how confident can I be that you're going to get that you're going to sort of follow through on that feedback?
Well, John, I'll answer that question.
Yeah, sure.
Listen, we're open to the feedback. That's why we're doing these things. We're listening to the feedback. If we think there's a reason or a need to course correct because we heard some feedback and we think there's another option or another way to go, we'll do that. That's why we're doing these meetings. We're doing it so we can listen. We're going to spend probably close to 8 or 9 hours listening to parents' feedback and answering questions, listening to feedback, and potentially coming up with options. We've already heard some good suggestions tonight that has added to our thinking. So I'm confident that the process is going to work. And if over the course of this process, there's something else that comes up, as I think a couple of my fellow board members said, if we need to course correct on that, we can.
Could I have one more question, Doug?
No, I want to make one statement. No, time out. I want one statement said though. We are still doing full day kindergarten somehow, some way this fall. I want to make sure we as the board.
I don't have a problem with that, Mike.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
John, last question.
Educational experts first to make sure that we had a plan that was viable and making sure that we were using best practices and fixing our equity issue. We knew we had an equity issue, and I didn't want to bring families in until we had a plan. There's no need to give a half plan. We need to come in with all the information and then present the plan to the families.
Why couldn't families be part of developing the plan? Why couldn't they have access to that at the table and help you and work with you in developing options, inform this from the beginning?
In the end, the families wouldn't have the access to the information that we have. A lot of this is confidential information that we have access to. And I need the people who have the educational expertise to push this forward.
What data's aggregate, man?
That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right. Thank you, guys. I appreciate your time.
And we appreciate your question. Two more speakers tonight. Toya Facey, you're up next. Toya, good evening.
Hi, I wasn't sure. Just really quickly, I just wanted to make a quick statement and just provide just a little bit of, I think, levity to kind of the situation is, there are children in this country who have to be bused an hour outside of their community just to go to good schools. Our situation in terms of redistricting is staying within our very small community. And we are lucky that we actually have that privilege, that we have such good schools in Berkeley Heights. So I do want to make that statement because I do think that it's very important to say that. I also want to say thank you to the Board of Education for walking into the 21st century and bringing full day kindergarten finally to Berkeley Heights. I have been following full day kindergarten for the last 8 years. I think discussion started when my child was 3. She is now 11 years old. And then while the impact of the possibility of the impact of schools in terms of children having to change schools has not been explicitly stated, it has been implied. And so I do think that that's very important. I don't think in any situation, every time we evaluated full day kindergarten, it has always been implied that there would be changes, right? So it's not new information. This is not kind of a situation where, oh, hey, by the way, we're doing full day kindergarten and now here's this. We've had these discussions for at least the last 8 years that I'm aware of. So I just want to also point that out as well. This is not a gotcha. This isn't new information. We all knew that there was going to be impact to the schools. And then the last thing is that I want to say is that while I recognize personally that my son might be impacted in terms of going to a different school, we all have our preferences in terms of schools. I know I do, and I've been in the district for many, many years. I also am willing to have that impact my son for the greater good of the community. And I think that that is very important. This is community. It's not about us individually. It's about what are we doing to make our community better. And I'm willing to have a potential impact to my child in a situation that I may not necessarily like, because I know it's going to be better for the community. So that after my son is done with full day kindergarten, the people who come after me also have that opportunity as well. So again, I just want to thank the board. I know that we're talking a lot about process, but then this whole discussion around full day kindergarten is getting mixed into this. And the two are linked. As much as people are trying not to make it linked, they are linked. And there is going to be an impact. And I think that that has always been implied for every single discussion that we've had around full day kindergarten. So that's it. Thank you.
Toya, thank you very much for your comments and your broader perspective. Much appreciated. The last speaker tonight is Tom Faragher. Tom, good evening. How are you tonight?
Fine, thank you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. It was clear to me from the presentation that the district operates about 75% of capacity based on your enrollments. So there's really no need to do any construction and certainly no need to spend $500,000 on making new bathrooms at Woodruff. The district operated with great success for many years with the K-5 elementary schools. I have serious doubts that anyone would find this is not a best practice. Berkeley Heights was a top performing district for many years, and sadly, I don't think that is true any longer. I urge you to go back to the K-5 model of schools, each school being a K-5. I want you to ask the entire community about it, not just the current parents that have children in the schools. Make it part of the survey. Make all the options part of the survey. Include all residents in your survey. All residents will be paying for whatever you do, so their voice is also important. And make the costs of each scenario part of the survey. Second, I'd like you to present a table of where the students will attend elementary school for each grade under each scenario. I would put in the rows would be the elementary districts, Hughes, Mountain Park, and Woodruff, and Mary Kay McMillan. The columns would be the grades, K-5, and each school that would be attended for that grade and that district would be shown in the cell, okay? The impact of changing schools on standardized test scores has been studied. There's a literature on this subject. You should be aware of that. Such studies are not hard to do. I did one myself. I urge you to consider the results. Changing schools will hurt your test scores. That's easy to demonstrate from using standardized test scores and the configuration type of the school, whether it be K-8 or whatever. There was a claim in the presentation that class sizes of 17 versus 24 makes a difference and that the larger size is inequitable. I would like to see any peer-reviewed literature that can support such a claim. And finally, there seems to be a claim that a referendum is a bad thing. I disagree. A referendum is a good thing. If you truly want broad community input, and I think you do, to avoid a referendum conveys a message that you're saying you want to impose a solution and you don't trust the public. Ask the public. If you have a good idea, you can convince them. If it's no good, they will tell you it's no good. Don't bypass a referendum. Thank you.
Tom, thank you very much for your comments. I'll just offer two perspectives. One is, it sounds like you have designed a spreadsheet in your mind. I've seen some of your spreadsheets in the past. If you want to send to me the spreadsheet that you envisioned,
Yes, I will.
I'd be happy
Yes,
to
I
see
will
that.
send
And
you it.
if we could do that, that'd be
Okay.
great. And I will make sure that somebody on our team shares with you the class size research that we're aware of as well, because that's something else you asked for.
Doug, I just want to say something in response to Tom. I was not implying in my comments that a referendum is a bad thing from a community input. I was simply talking about it from a financial perspective, not having to go out and raise debt in order to do this. I just wanted to clarify that.
Great, thanks, Chris. And Tom, thanks for your question. With that, I am going to close the citizens hearing tonight. First of all, I want to thank everybody who spoke. I haven't counted on my list how many people spoke this evening, but I want to thank everybody who spoke this evening. I think we've learned some things. We've got some good feedback from people. Hopefully we answered most, if not all, of the questions. I do expect similar comments, questions, and feedback at our upcoming sessions. So again, there'll be ample opportunity to continue this dialogue both on Wednesday night, April 14th, and Thursday night, April 22nd will be our two town hall sessions, and we welcome feedback with that. With that, we'll move to the remaining parts of our agenda, and I was pretty close, 10:58, pretty close to our goal of 11 o'clock. Okay, moving on to administration. Could I have a recommendation for administrative items A through G? And could I have all board members go off mute for voting?
Thank you.
I'll move items 14A through G.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Hyman,
Yes.
Mrs. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Chinchulli,
Yes.
Mr. D'Aquila,
Yes.
Mrs. Penna,
Yes.
Ms. Riley,
Yes.
Mrs. Kirsch,
Yes.
Mr. Reinstein.
Yes. Education items 15A through C.
I move items 15A through C.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Hyman,
Yes.
Mrs. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Chinchulli,
Yes.
Mr. D'Aquila,
Yes.
Mrs. Penna,
Yes.
Ms. Riley,
Yes.
Mrs. Kirsch,
Yes.
Mr. Reinstein.
Yes. Personnel item 16.
I move that we accept personnel items A through D for all board members and E through K for Berkeley Heights members only.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Hyman,
Yes on items A through D.
Mrs. Young,
Yes on all items.
Mr. Chinchulli,
Yes on all items.
Mr. D'Aquila,
Yes on all items.
Mrs. Penna,
Yes on all items.
Ms. Riley,
Yes, on all items.
Mrs. Kirsch,
Yes.
Mr. Reinstein.
Yes. 17 business.
Yes, I'll move 17A through D.
I'll second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Hyman,
Yes on all items.
Mrs. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Chinchulli,
Yes.
Mr. D'Aquila,
Yes.
Mrs. Penna,
Yes.
Ms. Riley,
Yes.
Mrs. Kirsch,
Yes.
Mr. Reinstein.
Yes. 18 finance.
I move that we approve the payment of the bills is listed below. Item A.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call.
Mr. Hyman,
Yes.
Mrs. Young,
Yes.
Mr. Chinchulli,
Yes.
Mr. D'Aquila,
Yes.
Mrs. Penna,
Yes.
Ms. Riley,
Yes.
Mrs. Kirsch,
Yes.
Mr. Reinstein.
Yes. Is there any other business to come before the board?
Yes.
I have a, oh, go ahead.
We're done. Robert?
Usually, right after there's a presentation, you always say, questions from the board. You went straight to the public and no board member got a chance to ask a question.
So the thinking behind that was we would use most of our meeting this evening to get feedback from the public, as we will at our 2 sessions. And we will use our April 29th meeting, where all board members will have had the opportunity to listen to the public, have all of their input, and then board members can summarize their own thoughts after they've heard all of the board, all the resident feedback. That was the thinking behind it.
No, that's great. I like it.
Good,
Okay.
thank you. Joy?
I just have a question, regarding like FAQs. With all these questions coming out, and I know there's stuff in the minutes, are we considering having just like an FAQ spot on the website where people could just see like a running list, and as they come through an email and everything, we just sort of add on to it
We're
so
in the
that they could
process
look at?
We're in the process of working on one right now. We keep going back and forth and editing, and tonight's a good example of things we can add to that FAQ document.
Okay, and where will it be?
We'll post it on the
Located.
website. I'll also eventually send it out in a letter once it's
Okay.
able to be, seen. Right now, we got a lot of comments and edits.
Mhm. Okay, great,
The hope,
thanks.
the hope, Joy, is that we'll have a first draft, in the next couple of days with the initial questions. And as more questions come up, we'll update that, within reason, right? You don't want the
Mhm.
document to be too long, but yes, we're doing that.
Great.
Any other business
Yeah,
or questions?
I have a question. I
Chris.
mean, I know that all of us are going to be listening in on these town halls, but are we going to publish anything after these individual town halls? I mean, there won't be minutes because it's not a formal board meeting, but do we have an intention to put something out to the community that summarizes what was discussed? Or
Yeah, yes, we do. Even though you're right, it's technically not a board meeting, but I think it's in everybody's best interest, both in the board's best interest and the community's best interest, to summarize it within reason, for that. So yes, we do plan to summarize the discussion and the questions that were answered. Some of it will go into the FAQ, and some of it will be more like a minutes kind of summary documentation.
yeah, because depending on people's schedules, and I'm talking about community members, they may not be able to make both town halls.
Correct. That's our plan.
Doug, I had a quick question on the town halls as well. What will the process be for those? How is that going to be?
Yeah, the process will be kind of like an Uber level citizens hearing. So we're not going to repeat the presentation. There'll be no other board business. It won't be an official board meeting. It will be a Board of Education town hall meeting. It will be an open Zoom, and it will look and feel like a citizens hearing. Just like a one item citizens hearing. We'll open it, and we'll take questions and provide feedback and answer questions. For that, there'll be no other board business covered. For that, it'll be truly like a town hall Q&A session. It'll be via Zoom. It'll like I said, the best way for me to describe it is it will be a citizens hearing only kind of meeting.
Okay.
Yep.
One other question. So
Sure.
what, other than putting this presentation up on the website, I mean, frankly, I was a little bit surprised that I think we had at some point 350 people listening in today. I expected twice that many people. So other than putting it up on the website, do we have thoughts as to how we can get this presentation out to a greater number of people before these town hall meetings, so that the more community members can see what's being proposed and hopefully weigh in?
Yeah, so Dr. Varley will be sending an email out to the entire school community tomorrow, as she oftentimes does. It will include a link to our website for that presentation. We're also going to actively promote it through our social media channels. Someone gave me a suggestion earlier today that we should put it on not both our sign at Columbia, but also the district sign downtown by the hardware store,
Mhm.
with just letting people know that there is an updated presentation. So we'll do everything we can to do two things. One, make people have access to the presentation, and two, broadly communicate the two town hall meetings on the Wednesday and the following Thursday on the 14th and 22nd.
In addition to that, a normal, I'm sure, letter to the editor or whatever the right publication is to
Right.
tap into to get through the electronic distribution.
Correct. Other questions from the board? Seeing that, I want to first of all thank again the administrative team, the board. I see 105 people still stuck around with us until 11:06 this evening. So thank you to the 106 who stayed on. I think you're right, Chris. I think it was about 350 or 360 at the peak. So glad we had that level of engagement and involvement, and we look forward to seeing others on April 14th. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So motion.
So moved.
So moved, and we'll see
Second.
many from the community back on April 14th. Good night, everybody. See you soon.
Good night.